Chapter 680. The person who had fallen in was an old man who was covered in wounds. His body was drenched in blood and flesh. He picked himself up immediately after falling in and hugged Dong Tianling's thigh, crying out, "Young master, save me." Dong Tianling hollered, "Don't touch me. I've just changed my clothes." 3 to 4 silhouettes came from afar. "Where do you think you're going?" The old man let out a strange cry and quickly got up again, leaping out of the window and disappearing in the blink of an eye. His movement skill was extraordinary. The pursuers were still in hot pursuit, leaping out of the window one after another. Dong Tianling stood up and cursed, F***ck. This young master is untainted by the mortal world, but the mortal world will taint me. I've only come out for a drink and I've actually been splashed with blood. This is simply. As he spoke, he tidied himself up, growing increasingly frustrated. That old bastard, why did he smear my blood all over me? How can I drink now? This young master is a particular person. What's this? As he spoke, he took out a tattered item from his clothes. It seemed to be some kind of fur. F***ck, what's this? Dong Tianling lifted the piece of fur up and observed it carefully. What the F***ck is this smell on it? It's been chopped into pieces. F***ck, why are there 2 pieces? Let me see. F***ck, are these 2 pieces actually connected? There seems to be something on it. What is this? Strange. As he said so, Chun Wanfeng and the rest perked up and stepped forward. What is it? What is it? Say what is it? The guards of the 4 noble young masters knew that something was amiss, but they could not stop him in time. Too many people had seen Dong Tianling examining the rag in the air. Everyone paled when they saw it happen. My young master. Can you have some martial world experience? It's obvious that the old man who's being hunted knows that he can't escape, so he stuffed it into your arms. It's fine that you left just like that. Why did you take it out? For an expert to be hunted down like this, how could the things he gave him be ordinary? You'll get yourself into big trouble. Young master, keep it quickly. One of the guards said in a low voice, this thing, what's wrong with that? Look at all of you. Dong Tianling guffawed. By the looks of it, it's only 1 or 2 pieces of treasure map at most, and it's not even complete, only 2 pieces, just a part of it. With this young master's current status, cultivation, and strength, would an ordinary treasure map even enter my eyes? This young master doesn't have anything else but money, ability, and ability. The other 3 young masters roared with laughter. They were extremely savage. Well said. We have plenty of money and great abilities. We are all experts. With the current strength of the 4 great hedonists, this wasn't an exaggeration. It was the truth. A few of the guards shook their heads and stomped their feet, their faces full of anxiety. Young master. Although your cultivation has soared, your eyesight hasn't improved at all. This is clearly a sign of great trouble. He leaned closer and said, if it were an ordinary treasure map, how could there be so many experts just now trying to steal it? Those people just now were all Dao realm cultivators. Any one of them was a rare sight in the Jianghu, and was an overlord-level existence. Dong Tianling was taken aback. What did you say? You're saying, this thing, is actually a rare treasure? The kind that will cause great trouble? The eyes of the martial world people at the other tables had already lit up upon hearing the commotion, each of them perking up their ears to listen. Yes, young master, this matter must not be taken lightly. The guard was so anxious that he was starting to spout nonsense. Dong Tianling's eyes darted around as he said, this matter is easy to deal with. That old bastard wants to frame your father? Then I'll let this old fellow go for wool and lose the rice he used to lure the chicken. He'll lose everything and get nothing. Bring me the fire. Dong Tianlong was gleeful. Let's burn it directly. Let's see who's the one who feels the pain in the end. How dare you plot against me? You're wrong. It had to be said that Dong Tianlong's plan was somewhat reasonable. I don't know what it is, but I'll burn it. What can you do to me if I burn it in front of everyone's eyes? Completely ignoring the dissuasion, Dong Tianlong went ahead with his plan. Without a second word, he lit the fire and the fire blazed brightly. Dong Tianlong used his knife to pick up the two pieces of the treasure map and place them into the fire without hesitation. Then, it burned for half a day. What kind of fur is this? Dong Tianlong was amazed. It's F*King not afraid of fire. It's quite rare. The guards of the four noble families had just felt a little better, but now their expressions turned even uglier. No matter how rare a treasure map was, it would only be worthy if one had sufficient ability. Without sufficient ability, it would only be the root of trouble. While it was a pity to burn it down, it had to be said that it was the best way to solve the problem in front of everyone. But, a fur that was not afraid of fire. What kind of fur was that? Everyone seemed to have only heard of one thing, a legend. In a distant legend, only the fur of various divine beasts was not afraid of fire. Dragon skin, Qilin skin and so on, could not be destroyed by fire. However, what kind of treasure map would be made using the fur of divine beasts? The leader of the guards was so anxious that his heart almost leaped out of his throat. Young master, let's go quickly. Dong Tianlong also realized that he had gotten himself into big trouble and said, It's all right, it's all right. I have the treasured saber that boss gave me. It's more important to get rid of this threat now. If we really bring it back, we'll only bring more trouble to ourselves. As he spoke, he placed it on the table and drew his saber. It had to be said that experience was indeed useful. Although Dong Tianlong's response was simple and brutal, it was still the best way to deal with the current situation. Of course, the premise was that he could really use his saber to deal with the two pieces of fur. Plop, 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 Dong Tianlong used all his strength to hack and slash more than 300 times. However, when he picked it up to take a look, there was not even a single mark left on it. F***ck, it's actually a treasure map fragment that's impervious to weapons and water and fire. Everyone was dumbfounded. What kind of great secret did it contain that such a precious piece of fur was actually needed to be recorded? At this moment, the four noble young masters' eyes lit up. For such a good item, even if it was a little trouble, it seemed to be worth it. Suddenly, a long laugh came from the side. Why go through so much trouble? Since young master doesn't want this trouble, just give it to me. A black shadow suddenly dashed over like lightning, grabbing the two pieces of the treasure map and retreating in a flash while laughing. How dare you? You're courting death. Put it down. In an instant, the four noble young masters and the 16 guards struck together, causing a storm to break out. Chapter 681. Countless gusts of wind intertwined. The man laughed and took the blow head-on, charging out like a whirlwind. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, he jumped out of the window hastily. His reflexes were swift and his cultivation base was impressive. After all, he had only spat out a mouthful of blood when he faced the combined forces of the four noble young masters and 20 others. Unexpectedly, just as the robber jumped out of the restaurant, he saw a flash of saber light and an eerie voice said, "Give it to you? Are you even worthy?" Faced with the sudden saber light, the man who had just charged out did not even have time to scream before his head was chopped off. Then, a ghostly silhouette flashed and was already hundreds of feet away. The speed of his movement was rare. Then, a few people leaped into the air, saber light and sword energy crisscrossing. Put down the treasure. In the blink of an eye, everyone on the scene had disappeared, already far away. Whistling sounds could be heard from afar as various signals and rockets were fired into the sky. Bam, 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 Dong Tianling held his hands in a daze, dumbstruck. His face was pale and his gaze dull. After a long time, he said with a tearful face, "What should I do? I seem to have gotten myself into big trouble." Everyone sighed in unison. Recalling how this child had taken the only treasure map of a mythical beast hide in the world, raised it up, set it on fire, and slashed it with a saber, although they knew that it was the right thing to do, they could not help cursing inwardly, "F***ck your mother, you don't do this even if you want to die. The treasure is already in your arms, but you still dare to show it off. Your father has never seen such an idiot in my life." On the way back, the 4 noble young masters were dejected while the 16 guards were like walking corpses. No matter what, the news of the treasure map of 2 mythical beast hides in Tiantang City spread like it had grown wings, spreading throughout the martial world in a short amount of time. It was also on that night that Yun Yang found out about it. Then, Yun Xiaoyao issued an order. "Seal off Tiantang City. From now on, only entry is allowed." This decision was absolutely correct. You can bring the treasure map out, but don't stay in Tiantang City to wreak havoc. At the same time, reinforce the security. Prepare for war. A series of orders were issued like thunder and lightning. However, everyone knew that another catastrophe had arrived. The epicenter was still Tiantang City, the capital of Yutong. "Boss, it's done." Dong Tianling was no longer as anxious as he had been in the restaurant earlier. He was beaming with joy. "Don't you worry about our work. It's flawless." Yun Yang rolled his eyes. "Done. Do I need you to tell me that? The entire country knew about it. I knew it. Moreover, this is just a script. Even the details of the lines are designed by me. If you make any more mistakes, it's your problem, okay? What's there to be proud of? The first step is complete. Begin the second step immediately. Act according to the established plan." On the second day, Dong Tianling invited his guests to a different restaurant. This restaurant might not be considered the most high-class in Tiantang City, but it was definitely the restaurant with the largest floor space. Spring Flower and Autumn Moon House. Those who attended the meeting today were almost all of Tiantang City's younger generation. There were few who were left out. Other than the 4 noble young masters, there was also the great Crown Prince Yun who was seated at the head of the table. Below him were the 2 young princes of the royal family, as well as young Master Ma, young Master Qian, young Master Wang, young Master Niu who had not appeared for a long time, as well as certain young masters who were making their debut. All in all, there were 15 to 16 people seated at each of the 10 large tables. The food was filled to the brim. Dong Tianling sat at the head of the table, looking like he had lost his parents. The guards of the major clans had long since guarded every window, door, roof, and even every blind spot. To put it nicely, it was a matter of great importance, so it must be kept a secret. However, the group of guards looked at each other in dismay. They had the urge to curse out loud in their hearts. "F***ck your grandpa, secrecy? You've invited 200 people and there are even more guards around. What secrecy is there to talk about? Secrecy my ***s. Only when one person knows about it can it be considered a secret. If there were 2 people who knew about it, the possibility of a secret being leaked would soar to 80%. If there were 3 people who knew about it, it would basically mean that the whole world knew about it. Now that there were more than 300 people, how could they still think of keeping it a secret? Ha ha ha, what's going on here today? One of the young masters was anxious. Just as the crowd sat down, he took the lead and asked, "What's going on? You've called all the brothers here. Is there something big going on?" If it were the 4 noble young masters of the past, they would have had some reputation, but it would have been infamy and infamy. The prodigal sons of the martial world's aristocratic families could not even be mentioned in public, they would not even enter the eyes of Yutong's noble young masters. They were on two different levels, two different worlds. However, the four noble young masters of today not only had the meritorious deeds of bravely going to the fortress of resilience and bathed in blood on the battlefield, they also possessed formidable abilities that allowed them to look down on the so-called 10th perfection legendary experts. Their reputation was no longer what it used to be. Otherwise, Dong Tianling's invitation might not have been given face. Silence. Someone beside him reminded him, "What are you so anxious about? Can't you see that young Master Yun is here too? He hasn't even spoken yet, who do you think you are?" Cough, cough. Yun Yang coughed. It was this cough that silenced the crowd immediately. Everyone straightened their backs and looked at Yun Yang. This was the power of a person's reputation. Even though there were two royal princes sitting here, no one dared to compare themselves to this young Master Yun. Young Master Yun's reputation was truly renowned throughout the world, shaking the nations of Tianxian. Did they not see how the third prince was severely injured by young Master Yun and almost turned into an idiot? Did His Majesty not say anything? Moreover, the crown prince did not seem to gain any advantage from young Master Yun either. In Tiantang City, not listening to young Master Yun meant that one was an idiot, a fool, and a wise man would not do so. There are two main reasons for gathering everyone here today. One of them is Dong Tianling's personal matter, young Master Dong Tianling. He needs everyone's help, to lend a helping hand. This matter of his is really an undeserved calamity. Sigh, it's just that he's a little dumb, a little silly, and a little dumb. Other than that, there's nothing wrong with him. Yun Yang sighed and looked at Dong Tianling with disappointment. Why don't you say it yourself? Tell me, how can you always be related to such rare matters? Dong Tianling stood up with a long face, his face a little green, looking like he was about to cry at any time. Dear brothers, the young masters who claimed to be knowledgeable felt chills running down their spines upon hearing his words. Their gazes were strange as goosebumps rose all over their bodies. F***ck. What was he trying to do? Why did he even use the word dear? Just say it, what was he trying to do? Chapter 682. Brothers, you must help this little brother this time. Dong Tianling wiped his face as he spoke of his heartbreak, tears streaming down his cheeks. Snot and tears streamed down his face, there was no trace of his previous unruly demeanor. I can't live on any more, this mustard was King awesome. Everyone was shocked by this scene, and they all muttered in their hearts, could it be that this guy has gone crazy? Sigh, it's a long story. Dong Tianling sobbed, it's probably because this brother has been in the limelight recently and attracted the jealousy of others. Although it said that one is mediocre to not be envied, but, sigh, just yesterday I was schemed against by someone with ulterior motives. 2 treasure maps, just a matter of time, sigh, as he spoke, his face was already tearful, full of reluctance to speak. He was a proper actor. What happened after that? The crowd was obviously more nosy. Everyone knew what had happened to this fellow yesterday. All of them were full of admiration for this guy's reaction, how stupid was he? I didn't think much of it at first, but after I went back to ask around, I found out that I've gotten myself into big trouble this time. Dong Tianling thumped his chest and stomped his feet. The fur that I touched yesterday was impenetrable, impervious to fire and water. It seems to be the fur of a mythical beast, perhaps even a dragon's skin, tisk. Gasps of surprise rang out. Everyone here is also an experienced and knowledgeable person, so you should have heard that since the beginning of time in our profound sky continent, including official and unofficial history, novels, and biographies. There was only one treasure map that was made from dragon skin. Dong Tianling's face was filled with the regret of missing out on a treasure that was already in his arms. How precious. How rare. I actually. He could not continue speaking as tears streamed down his cheeks. The young master's curiosity was piqued. What kind of treasure map is it? Why does it sound like Brother Dong knows a lot about the details? Hurry up and share such explosive news. Yes. You should at least tell us the whole story if you want us to help. What exactly do you want us to help with? How? What's going on? If you don't tell us, how are we supposed to intervene? How are we supposed to intervene? It won't be good if we accidentally help. For a time, there were many different opinions. Dong Tianling took a moment to calm himself down. After a while, he finally said in a choked voice, "Now that things have come to this, I have no choice but to put aside my pride and seek help from my brothers in order to protect myself. There's no harm in me telling everyone what I know, but please don't leave me in the lurch. I only found out after I went back that the dragon hide treasure map was said to have originated from one of the few immortals who had appeared in our continent many years ago. That immortal was known as the 17th Master of the Abyss." 17th Master of the Abyss. Hiss, hiss hiss hiss, hiss 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 hiss, gasps could be heard. Everyone's expression suddenly turned solemn. So the owner of the Dragonhide treasure map was actually the 17th Master of the Abyss? In that case, it wouldn't be strange to use the dragon skin to cover the entire treasure map. This was a legendary figure that everyone looked up to. Compared to the 17th Master of the Abyss, the so-called number 1 expert, number 1 swordsman, and so on were not even worth mentioning. After the Age of Gods, it was a unique period where civilization changed and the continent was overturned. It was the first time the continent had appeared and humans were born. Countless traces of the earlier era had been overturned by the sea and buried in this land. On a certain month and year, a person suddenly appeared out of nowhere and called himself the 17th Master of the Abyss. This was the beginning of his legend. The so-called beginning of a legend was probably referring to this 17th Master of the Abyss. No one knew where he came from, but ever since he came out, he was known as the 17th. There was a record of someone asking him, "Why are you called the 17th?" The 17th Master said, "Before me, there were 16 other seniors who came out from our side. All of them were already listed as immortals and had become great figures like the rulers of heaven and earth. As a junior who ranks 17th, my greatest wish in this life is to catch up to the footsteps of my predecessors. How would I dare to take up a senior's title?" The most important information revealed by this sentence was that there were 16 others before the 17th Master, such as the 1st Master of the Abyss, the 11th Master of the Abyss, and so on. These young masters had all ascended to the heavens without exception, achieving immortality. Once this fact was revealed, the entire continent was shaken several times over. Of course, the premise of this fact was that the 17th Master of the Abyss was invincible from the moment he appeared. He traversed the entire Tianxian continent without a rival. Later on, he traveled to the boundless sea, the snowy mountains, and the boundless forest. All of them were smooth sailing, and he could do as he pleased. Another result of his freedom was that countless rare and exotic beasts died under his hands. It seemed that there were many powerful species that were not able to reproduce, and thus no longer existed in the world. In the end, there was really no one who could stand up to him. A certain young master let out a long sigh and said, "Among the heroes of the world, there is actually no one who can stand up to me. Life is so lonely and miserable. Forget it, I should find another place to train myself." However, the Tianxian continent is full of heroes. How can it be devoid of talents? 17th, I have slain a dragon today and specially made a dragonhide treasure map to be scattered under the heavens. If anyone is fated to obtain it, they can inherit my legacy. I hope that after many years, we can meet again in the 9 heavens. After saying that, he grabbed a dragon from the boundless ocean and slashed it with his sword. he took a piece of dragon skin from its neck and drew a map. After thinking for a while, he tore it into 6 pieces and blew at them to scatter them in all directions of mystic sky. After doing all this, the 17th Master of the Abyss said, "First young master and the other seniors, 17th is coming." In a flash, he leaped into the clouds. At this time, thunder and lightning roared, and the sky darkened. Vaguely, a path to the heavens could be seen flashing in the sky. As the 17th Master leaped up, the path to the heavens disappeared. From then on, the 17th Master was no longer seen in the world. The above was the truth. No matter how long the history, this was still a legacy that could not be ignored. However, how could such a legendary figure not arouse wild and fanciful thoughts? How could the item of inheritance not be coveted and coveted by others? However, that dragon skin treasure map had never been seen for so many years. Actually, it was understandable that anyone who obtained a piece of it would definitely treasure it in secret and absolutely be unwilling to reveal any information about it to others. It had been hundreds of thousands of years since this ancient legend. In all these years, the 6 pieces of the dragonhide treasure map had never appeared in the world. Moreover, because there were no more unparalleled experts like the 17th Master, it gradually became a legend that only existed in legends. By now, almost everyone had forgotten about it. Even if there was the shock of yesterday, not many people would connect it to the real thing. The so-called skin of a mythical beast, or rather, the skin of a dragon, only existed in legends. However, in today's world, who had actually seen a dragon? Or even other divine beasts? But now, because of one person. A great person. A great idiot. He actually cut it with a knife and burned it in front of everyone's eyes, proving that there really was a certain kind of skin in this world that was impervious to weapons and fire. It was definitely a good thing. This was, without a doubt, a great idiot. This person had obtained 2 pieces of the treasure map and was being chased by people with ulterior motives. He had stuffed it into his arms to divert attention, but it was only a temporary measure. He had thought that with his experience and vision, he would definitely not be able to see through it. He had planned to retrieve it secretly in the future. However, this great idiot had revealed it to the public in order to vent his anger due to his usual foppish behavior. What was even more coincidental was that this gigantic idiot had quite a bit of cultivation base, insight, and wealth. First, he disdainfully wanted to destroy the treasure map to take revenge on the person who had resorted to expedient measures. Then, he grew fearful of the treasure map's impenetrable material and directly used a E-grade divine weapon to forcefully destroy it. However, his countermeasure was equivalent to repeatedly showing that this treasure map was the legendary dragonhide treasure map. In the end, it had inevitably been snatched away by someone who coveted it. This process was like someone had stuffed a check that could be cashed in half a world's worth of wealth into your arms. Then, you took it out in public to check if it was real. After confirming that it was real, it was then snatched away by someone else. Hearing Dong Tianling mention the 17th Master of the Abyss, everyone recalled it at once. At once, the gazes they gave Dong Tianling were extremely complicated. Your father has never admired an idiot in this life, but your father must admire this idiot in front of me. Chapter 683. Brothers, I'm also being wronged. How am I supposed to explain this? Dong Tianling wept and said, how would I know it was this treasure? At that time, that old bastard leaned on me, and my whole body was covered in blood. I was drinking at that time, how could I still drink? It was disgusting, you guys don't know. Everyone looked askance at him. Drinking? Disgusting? Can your wine be compared to the dragonhide treasure map? Even if it disgusts you to death, you should have guarded the treasure without fear. Besides, who would have thought that these 2 pieces of leather would be treasures? There's clearly a moldy smell on them, it's the rotting stench of an animal's carcass, Dong Tianling continued weeping. Think about it, put yourself in my shoes and think about it. If I didn't throw it out, could I have brought it home? It's so dirty. Ah. Everyone looked askance at him. He had to bring it home. He had to bring it home. Dirty? If it were me, I'd bring it home even if it was 10,000 times dirtier. This wastrel. What an uncountable wastrel, what a short-sighted fool, why was it this fellow who was drinking and not me? Obviously, the temptation of wealth had caused everyone's rationality to go out of control. Rationality had never had a high chance of winning when faced with such a huge temptation. Within the boundaries of Tiantang City, us brothers are naturally the most powerful. Therefore, Dong Tianlong would like to shamelessly ask for everyone's help. Dong Tianlong said in anguish, "Help me find this thing back." Everyone sucked in a long breath, obviously not expecting this to be Dong Tianlong's request. As they listened to Dong Tianlong's complaints, their first thought was that this fellow was acting pitiful, probably to let everyone here be his witness to prove that the treasure was no longer with him. He was just playing it safe and playing it safe. Who would have thought that this fellow's request for help was actually this? How could you even open your mouth? Find it back? Of course, it must be found back. But find it for you? Huh, I'm in a mess right now. I really don't have any better ideas. I've provoked such a big trouble, and I still have to face the clan's heavy punishment. The only ones I can count on are the brothers here. Everyone sneered in their hearts. This idiot has done the stupidest thing in the world again. It's fine if you secretly look for it yourself, there's always a chance. But you actually told this big secret to so many people in your panic. It's destined that you'll never be able to find it again. But it's not like I can't find it. As long as I find it, it's mine. That hidden treasure is mine. How can I miss such a great opportunity? Dong Tianlong bowed deeply. Brothers, please help me. Dong Tianlong is eternally grateful. From now on, if there's anything you need, I'll do it even if I have to risk my life. He raised his glass with a sincere expression. Everyone who has come here today has given me face. They are my brothers who have gone through life and death with me. Let us raise our glasses. May our friendship last forever. Even if the seas run dry and the rocks decay, our friendship will never change. All the popinjays raised their glasses at the same time. Since Brother Dong has said so, this little brother and the others will naturally not refuse. Even if we have to go through a mountain of blades or a sea of fire, we'll still go for Brother Dong. Everyone, do your best. We must find it. This friendship will never change, even if the seas run dry and the rocks decay. That's right. We must find it and help Brother Dong through this difficult time. Come, come, come. Let's drink together. Let's drink together. Friendship lasts forever. Friendship lasts forever, our friendship will never be forgotten in this lifetime. Everyone raised their glasses. When it came to the words, friendship will last forever, affection will never be forgotten in this life, everyone had a very absurd feeling in their hearts, as if they had been driven to a dead end. King wish for us to be with you forever with just a glass of wine? Our friendship will never be forgotten in this lifetime? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Thank you, dear brothers, for your kindness. Dong Tianlong was moved to tears. Everyone must eat, drink, and play to your heart's content today. Everything is on me. Righteous. Let's drink. Let's not go home until we're drunk. Come, come, come. Let's go look for the treasure map after this glass of wine. The earlier we find it, the earlier we can save Brother Dong from this disaster. We must find it, no matter what. Everyone was drinking and shouting their slogans passionately while calculating in their hearts. If I find these 2 pieces of treasure map, will I cultivate martial arts? Or, perhaps, This was a huge temptation. Thinking about it, everyone was eager to put their thoughts into action. They were restless, as if there were maggots under their butts. Let me go home and set it up quickly. This was the dragon hide treasure map that recorded the 17th master of the Abyss's legacy. Something terrible could happen if we were a step too late. Yun Yang stood up at this moment. Now that we're done with young Master Dong, let me talk about something else. Young Master Yun, please speak. We're all ears and listening to your teachings. Actually, about this matter. Marshal Tai Zheng came to me for a drink a few days ago and asked me to think of a solution. Yun Yang went straight to the point. Now that the war has ended, there are many things waiting to be done, especially when the Board of Military is running out of money and food. There are so many warriors who have died, yet their pensions aren't in place. The faces of all the young masters in the room instantly turned pale. Brother, don't go on. We know what you mean when you say this. You want to borrow money again? Yes, we're all sensible people. We're all brothers, so I'd like to take this opportunity to collect some donations from all of you. Yun Yang smiled and said, I know that other than being brothers, we're all sensible people and rich people. We're not rich people, we're very poor, and, collecting donations? It's not about borrowing money. As one of the sensible people, I'll reveal an unconfirmed piece of information to all of you. If there's really no money, Marshal Tai might very well take extreme measures. Yun Yang smiled. For example, confiscating property and filling the national treasury. Everyone froze. Could it be done? Of course, this is only an extreme measure when there's no other choice. It's impossible at this stage. Yun Yang smiled warmly. Because of this young master has already promised Marshal Tai that each of us will fork out 10 million silver taels, and then everything will be fine. These are the specially designated families. The names on the list are all given 10 million silver taels. Everyone here is a sensible person. You won't make a choice that you don't understand, will you? 10 million silver taels. Why don't you just go and die? And what's with the list and the names on the list? F***ck, it must be someone from above who's nailed their heads to death. There's no room for negotiation. If you really don't have enough money, I can help to pass the message to Marshal Tai. I believe Marshal Tai will be understanding. At most, he'll just pay a visit. Pay a visit? F***ck your greetings. I can't let that fellow pay a visit no matter what. Other than the dozens of families on the list that I have in my hand, each of you has 10 million silver taels, the rest of you only have about 2 million silver taels. Cough, I'm troubled by this as well. I know that all of you aren't rich and it's not easy, but 2 million silver taels should be able to be taken out with some effort, isn't it? Chapter 684. Squeeze a little? F***ck you're squeezing. How are we supposed to squeeze? You've almost taken half of our lives away just like that. What is this? In spite of this, no one dared to refute or question him. They did not even dare show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction on their faces. Who was this Yun Yang in front of them? This was young Master Yun, the young prince of the residence of King Yun. Who was behind the residence of King Yun? Yun Xiaoyao, King Xiaoyao. Would young Master Yun dare to do this if King Xiaoyao had not nodded? Of course, he had nodded. Who was behind King Xiaoyao? Without a doubt, it could only be the current emperor. How could King Xiaoyao do this if His Majesty did not nod his head for such an important matter, extortion in front of everyone? It was conceivable that he had nodded his head. As for why Yun Yang insisted that he had discussed it with Marshal Tai, it was because it was inconvenient for King Xiaoyao and His Majesty to show up. How bad would it sound if they did? Those two were still rather prideful. It could be said that it was appropriate for Marshal Tai to take the lead in this matter, and it was even more appropriate for Yun Yang to show up. F***ck, who would dare to be dissatisfied? Putting aside the malice from the two highest authorities in the Empire of Yutong, Yun Yang himself might not even be able to wait for the imperial court's ruling or for Marshal Taizheng to pick a quarrel. His head would be gone just like that in the middle of the night. What? Young Master Yun did it? Do you have proof? Even if you had proof, the other party could make it disappear in a blink of an eye. He might even ask you later, do you have any more proof? This kind of thing was completely possible. It was conceivable. It would be a meaningless death. What? You said that Yun Yang coming out to collect money was His Majesty's order? Do you have proof? If you don't have proof, you're slandering, you're framing, you're disrespecting the Emperor, you're lawless, you're deceiving the Emperor, you're plotting a rebellion. If that's the case, it won't be just you, your entire family will be gone. Do you have proof? Show it to me. It's death whether I show it or not. Everyone's mind was filled with billions of horses, alpacas, and grass mud horses galloping back and forth in an endless stream. For a moment, they were all stunned. A few well-known wealthy families even wanted to cry, but they had no tears. It was one thing for other families to fork out 10 million, but if one's own family could only fork out 10 million, then they could only wait for death. Although he didn't specifically mention names, but, was there a need for such a thing? Alright. I'll say it again. Everyone here is smart. Let's start the fundraising now. Well, the theme this time is to donate money, not to borrow money. Yun Yang chuckled. Therefore, everyone has to weigh how much you're willing to contribute. You must have a count in your heart. I won't return the money. Absolute silence. This young master doesn't have much income, so I'd rather spend the money I have. However, the country is in danger, so of course, every man has his responsibility. This young brother has brought out all of his assets this time, 20 million taels. Yun Yang set an example and made a generous offer. Since Big Brother has said so, this young brother has always fought alongside many of Yutong's men against the enemy even though I'm not from Yutong. I still remember the bloodbath at the Fortress of Resilience until now. No matter how tight my finances are, I'm willing to fork out 20 million silver taels. Xia Bingchuan was generous. Little brother, 20 million. Little brother, 20 million as well. I'll fork out 30 million. I'll have to fork out more just for my uncle. It's true that the money I have on hand is limited, so I can only fork out 10 million more than my brothers. Please excuse me, Zhou Yunsan said. The four noble young masters livened up the atmosphere at once. They were collectively embarrassed. However, how could the other young masters endure it? They could only swallow the bitter pill in silence. I'll fork out 10 million, me too. Sob, what are you crying for? I'll fork out 10 million. No matter how unwilling they were, they still enthusiastically offered out their donation amounts. Now, everyone clearly understood that this sum of money was probably a life-saving measure. If they did not come out. Just wait and see. After 3 rounds of wine, Yun Yang stood up to bid farewell. Everyone here is the nation's pillar. You've all stepped in to donate generously during this time of national crisis. I thank all of you on behalf of Marshal Tai. Then, Yun Yang took the lead and left with a flourish. It had only been a meal, but he had pocketed a fortune that was close to 1.5 billion silver taels. It was as if he had pocketed a few mountains of gold. Basically, he had already emptied the pockets of these guys in front of him. As for Taizheng, of course, Taizheng didn't discuss these things with me. Yun Xiaoyao and His Majesty the Emperor didn't know about it either. What was happening now was really Yun Yang's doing alone, that was all. In spite of this, the donation was really a donation. Yutong had sacrificed tens of millions of soldiers in these years. Just this year alone, there were close to 4 million soldiers who had been buried in the battlefield, unable to return to their homes. 1 year. What a cruel number it was. Even if the 1.5 billion silver taels were to be distributed among each of these 4 million soldiers, it would only amount to slightly more than 300 silver taels. What about the soldiers who were still alive and serving? The sum of money seemed to be a lot, but it was not inexhaustible when it was calculated. Even if it included the ones that he had plundered along the way, it was still far from enough. Although it might be an exaggeration to say that it was a drop in the bucket, Yun Yang still had to subsidize a lot more for it to be sufficient. On the same night, Yun Xiaoyao took the sum of money and headed to the palace. Once his ring was opened, the emperor's study was filled with banknotes. Both brothers were bathed in the sea of banknotes. Card. His Majesty wanted to say, F***ck. However, before he could speak, he remembered it and changed it to card. Where did he get so much money from? Cough, it's Yun Yang. Sigh, this child is audacious, actually organizing a donation. You know that he's quite popular. Yun Xiaoyao spoke the truth, naturally, pushing the blame to his son. After all, there was no need to find someone else to endorse this fact. Good child, what a good child. His Majesty was so moved that his hands were shaking. It was said that the imperial power was supreme, and that his words were law. However, only the person involved knew that there were too many times when he could only compromise. How could he be like Yun Yang, who could act as he pleased and act as he pleased? His Majesty knew this, and so did Yun Xiaoyao. This child means that this sum of money has to be used for a specific purpose. Yun Xiaoyao said, to be used exclusively for the families of the sacrificed soldiers. This, approved. His Majesty made the final decision. If there's another end to this matter, Yun Xiaoyao said, I will bear the responsibility. His Majesty was resolute. It was only then that Yun Xiaoyao heaved a sigh of relief. It was best to push the blame to His Majesty so that he could relax. Although Yun Xiaoyao knew that Yun Yang did not care about these things, it was better to avoid trouble if possible. If that's the case, this young brother shall take his leave. Now that there was nothing else, Yun Xiaoyao naturally wanted to slip away. Sigh, it's rare to have such a wonderful event. How can you not accompany me for a drink before you leave? His Majesty said. Forget it. Yun Xiaoyao chuckled humorlessly. My head is splitting right now. The Dragonhide treasure map has suddenly appeared in Tiantang City, and the outside world is already in chaos. The sudden appearance of that thing will only cause a greater commotion than the dictum of death. Yun Xiaoyao was right. The whole of Tiantang City was in utter chaos now. Some brothers have doubts about the 17th young master of the abyss. I just want to say that I've given everyone a hint at the beginning of this book. Mystical Qi. Tianxian continent. Although there are no more golden mystical and spirit mystical, everyone understands. Chapter 685. The chaos in Tiantang City this time was even worse than the previous one. After all, the brilliance of the dictum of death would only be amazed by the assassins of this world, but the Dragonhide secret treasure would make anyone who knew about its background go crazy. The entire martial world was in a frenzy. The 17th master of the Abyss's Dragonhide treasure map had reappeared in the world. The speed at which this news spread was even faster than lightning. In less than 2 days' time, almost everyone knew about it and it was a popular story. Even Yun Xiaoyao was doubtful. How the F***ck did the news spread? How much time had it been? Tiantang City, which had gradually returned to its normal state, was once again overcrowded with martial artists, perhaps even more so than before. Now, all the martial artists in the world, whether they were famous or not, whether their cultivation base was high or low, whether they were strong or weak, were all rushing towards the city, one after the other. Had it been taken away? Was this not nonsense? This thing had never been ownerless before. As long as I snatch it back, the treasure must have been prepared for me. I am the chosen one. What? My cultivation base is low, it's useless even if I go? F***CKU. What if someone walks past me with the dragon hide treasure map and shoves it into my arms? As long as I'm not as stupid as Dong Tianling and let everyone know about it, the treasure will be mine. How do you know that someone won't play the same trick again and plant it on a person with a lower cultivation base, and then die under the pursuit of others? Or maybe I run into a heavily injured person who happens to be carrying the dragonhide treasure map? What if, no matter what, I must go? I must be the fated one. Otherwise, why would the treasure exist alongside me? The crowd was surging. Tiantang City's 4 city gates were now lined up in long queues, stretching for miles. The queue seemed to be growing longer as there was an endless stream of people coming from afar, like rivers flowing into the ocean. That was the only record of an immortal in the Tianxian continent. Yun Xiaoyao, who had returned from the palace, began to fret, so much so that his hair was turning white. What was going on? The Assassins' League had finally come to a halt, but now there was such an earth-shattering event. Dong Tianling was really a troublemaker. Grabbing Dong Tianling, King Yun did not care about his identity in the Dong family. He raised his rod and gave him a good beating, gritting his teeth in anger. "It's all your fault, you bastard." Eldest young master Dong Tianling, whose leg had been broken, could only moan as he lay on the bed. He really wanted to explain, "My boss, your son asked me to do this," however, Dong Tianling did not say this out loud. After all, if he did, it might not just be a broken leg. King Xiaoyao was ruthless, but compared to Yun Yang, there was a vast difference. At most, King Xiaoyao could only break his leg once and he would be fine after that. If it were Yun Yang, however, he could break his leg 100 times or even more. Dong Tianling wisely chose to keep his mouth shut. Wasn't it because they were treating him like an idiot? So what? I've been an idiot for so many years, I don't care. Why is this matter so strange? Why did it suddenly erupt? Yun Xiaoyao frowned as he looked at Yun Yang in front of him. Yun Yang coughed. I really don't know. Dong Tianling and the others have been staying at home all this time. They've been as quiet as chickens. Other than cultivating, they've been chatting and fooling around. Not a single incident has happened. They can be said to be well behaved. Going out to drink like this is a common occurrence. Who knew that things would turn out this way? Actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with Dong Tianling's response. It's just that the secret treasure's carrier is too rare. It's invulnerable. Otherwise, it would have been destroyed and there would have been no problem at all. Yun Xiaoyao squinted his eyes and said faintly, "It's because of this that I find it odd. I don't think Dong Tianling's brain is that good. Instead, he seems to have purposely led to the rarity and preciousness of the pelt. So, you wouldn't be unaware of this matter, would you?" Facing his father who had suddenly become wise, Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, "This matter will not cause any harm to the empire of Yutang." Yun Xiaoyao sighed. "So you do know. Or perhaps, you're actually the mastermind behind this? Don't worry. Everything that's happening now is within my expectations, within my grasp." Yun Yang said calmly, "Although the martial world storm will inevitably rise from here on out, Yutang can also use this opportunity to soar into the sky." Yun Xiaoyao said, "Within your expectations, within your grasp. You're getting more and more boastful now. This is equivalent to dancing on the tip of a blade. How can you be sure that you won't get hurt?" Yun Yang said, "How can one not take risks if one wishes to conquer the world? Do you know that Tiantang City will be the center of the entire continent once this matter is out? Countless martial world people and sects will come. By then, it will form a massive whirlpool." Yun Xiaoyao sighed worriedly. I'm only afraid that they won't come. A hint of red flashed across Yun Yang's eyes. Yun Xiaoyao was silent. If it's done properly, Yutong's foundation can be laid from here on out, Yun Yang said in a low voice. Yun Xiaoyao was silent at Yun Yang's words. After a long time, he finally asked, can it really be so? Of course, and it's not just that. Yun Yang said, there are a few martial world sects that I want to take the chance to annihilate. There are also a few people that I want to finish off along the way. As for the other miscellaneous matters, I'll deal with all of them as well, ending everything with this plan. Yun Xiaoyao asked worriedly, will this plan bring harm to the royal family? Yun Yang replied indifferently, so what if it's the royal family? Those who should bleed will inevitably bleed. Yun Xiaoyao heaved a long sigh towards the sky. There was no longer any need to continue speaking. Are you cleaning up the mess now? Yun Xiaoyao asked with a hint of melancholy. Yun Yang was silent for a long time. It's not that stage yet. Yun Xiaoyao sighed again. There's always wind and thunder before us. We must proceed with caution, Yun Xiaoyao finally said. After saying this, he seemed to have aged many years in an instant. Yun Yang felt apologetic. He wanted to say something, but he did not say it in the end. In the middle of the night, just as Yun Yang was about to sleep, Yun Xiaoyao suddenly arrived. This matter might be troublesome. Yun Xiaoyao's face was rather pale. What's wrong? I have to confirm something with you. Are the two pieces of leather you've made really impenetrable, impervious to fire and water? Dong Tianling, are they not faking it? It seems like they are, sigh. Yun Xiaoyao sighed in melancholy. Chapter 686. So, while Dong Tianling's request for help is fake, the props are real and there's a truth to it? I think so. The reason you made up, where did the legend of the 17th Master of the Abyss come from? Yun Xiaoyao's gaze grew sharper. Yun Yang chuckled. This legend isn't exactly a secret. Anyone who is knowledgeable would know about it. There are many records of it in unofficial history. It can be said to be the most famous legend and myth in Tianxian continent. Yun Xiaoyao stood rooted to the spot. After a long time, he said bitterly, Child, have you ever thought that these two pieces of leather are real? Yun Yang replied, it has to look real. Otherwise, would I have asked Dong Tianling to guide the plot? Doesn't it look real now? Doesn't that mean that you know it might be real? This is not important. Yun Xiaoyao heaved a long sigh. Child, there's always a chance. I can only hope that you've handed over the fake one. Otherwise, you might have missed the most important opportunity of your life. That opportunity can make you immortal, a legend of immortality, a legend. Yun Xiaoyao's regret was like the waves of the ocean, never ending, each wave higher than the one before. That's a story for another time. Yun Yang said calmly, first and foremost, I am a human. As a human, I have my responsibility and my duty to protect. I have family, friends, brothers. There are unrequited favors and unavenged grudges. Then, I am a citizen of Yutong. As a citizen of Yutong, I have a duty to protect my country, my home, my people. Then, I am still a soldier of Yutong. Protecting the country is my original intention. Only after I've done all these can I say what a cultivator is like. Only then can I have the right to say that I'm a cultivator with the potential to become an immortal. So, no matter what I do, no matter what methods I use, I want to accomplish all these before I talk about the rest. I'm not boasting, nor am I trying to sell my feelings. This is what I really think and do, moving forward steadily. In fact, for the sake of my goal, I will even do some dishonorable things without any hesitation. Yun Yang answered honestly, what's the harm in that? Yun Xiaoyao could only sigh. Now, let's talk about these two pictures. There's a 50% chance that they're real. There's also a 50% chance that it's fake. Yun Yang said casually, if it's fake, it doesn't matter. If it's true, then I only have two in my hands. According to my calculations, we need at least 6 or 7 pieces of this map to find that secret place. I have confirmed this long ago. There is no doubt about it. Let's take 10,000 steps back. Even if this dream comes true, no one has been able to gather all of them in the past hundreds of thousands of years. Even if I keep them for a long time, I don't know when I'll be able to gather them all. If I can't gather all the maps, I won't be able to find that place even after 100,000 years. Since that's the case, I might as well use him as a tool. What's the big deal? Everyone in the world is after it, but I, Yun Yang, don't care about it at all. His words rendered Yun Xiaoyao speechless. He was speechless for a long while, stunned on the spot. After a long while, he nodded and said hoarsely in a complicated voice, perhaps you're right. But you can't deny that you've already confirmed your future. Your future isn't here. Are you preparing for a rainy day, paving the way for the future? Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, paving the way for the future isn't so clear. I can only say that perhaps. He grinned, beaming like the sun as he said harmoniously, no matter what the future holds, what I want to do now is to do the right things and the wrong things during the time I'm in the Empire of Yutang. When I leave or when I die, I have a clear conscience. That's all. This is already enough. This is also my highest aspiration so far. Yun Yang said, for now, such a thought is great. However, when I think I've done everything and leave, perhaps I'll change my mind when I come back. Because it's always been others who owe me. I'll never owe anyone anything, be it in the past, present, or future. Yun Yang smiled gracefully. Yun Xiaoyao looked at Yun Yang's smile, feeling a mixture of emotions. After a long while, he said bitterly, perhaps, you don't owe anyone anything. Yun Yang suddenly felt a twinge of bitterness in his heart. Looking at the handsome middle-aged man in front of him, he actually felt an indescribable sense of emotion. Perhaps one day, when he left, the entire world would owe him. Only this middle-aged man in front of him, he owed him. Right from the beginning, he had used him to conceal his identity as one of the 9 Supremes. It had been going on until now. However, he had never mentioned it. Recently, he had already suspected and even confirmed that Yun Yang was Supreme Cloud of the 9 Supremes, but he still did not mention it. Instead, he had feigned ignorance as usual and helped Yun Yang the most. He was not Yun Yang's father. However, he had already treated Yun Yang as his own son. At that moment, Yun Yang was stunned, rooted to the spot. Yun Xiaoyao stood quietly for a while before he suddenly smiled stiffly and said, it's late. Go to sleep. Saying that, he turned to leave. Wait, Yun Yang called out subconsciously. Yun Xiaoyao stopped and asked in a low voice, what is it? Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he smiled bitterly and said, nothing. Good, sleep early. Yun Xiaoyao strode out of the room. The door closed. Yun Yang was still standing in the room, looking at the closed door. For a long, long time, he did not move an inch. What I owe you, how am I going to make it up to you? He heaved a long sigh. Just now, he had the urge to take action, but he did not do so in the end. Perhaps, this urge was the only compensation he could give that person, the most valuable compensation. The 17th Master of the Abyss. The Dragonhide Treasure Map. Impenetrable. Impervious to fire and water. This series of explosive news pointed to a single location, Tiantang City. The news spread rapidly in an extremely short amount of time, reaching everyone's ears. It was so unexpected, yet so captivating, that it caused one's imagination to run wild. Yutong's imperial court reacted swiftly and had already issued a curfew at once, forbidding entry and exits. However, the reality now was that there were very few people who left. Instead, those who were not allowed in by the officials had all entered. Chapter 687. Tiantang City was Yutong's capital. If it was not for the enemy invading the city gates would be opened every day to allow the citizens to enter and leave freely. Therefore, no matter how strict the martial law was, the citizens would still be allowed to enter and leave. At most, the inspection would be slightly stricter. The people of the martial world did not think of themselves as ordinary people most of the time. They felt that they were different from the common folk, but now, they were the common folk. It was the truth. Were the people of the martial world not common folk? The so-called ban was at most to slow down the speed of the martial world practitioners entering Tiantang City. That was all. Furthermore, the ban was used against the common folk. While the ordinary martial world practitioners were rather intimidating, these ace cultivators who thought they were qualified to snatch the Dragonhide treasure map were all high and mighty existences. They had 10,000 ways to invade Tiantang City without alerting anyone or any force. The first batch of people who entered were the assassins who had come because of the dictum of death. They had gradually ceased their activities but had yet to go far. The Assassins' League seemed to have won the battle with the Four Seasons Tower, but in reality, both sides had suffered great losses. Fearing that the infamous Four Seasons Tower would retaliate, they had broken up and retreated to the forest 1,000 miles around Tiantang City to recuperate and wait for a chance to strike. After all, the mission had not been completed, the mission of the dictum of death had not been completed. How could they leave just like that? Unexpectedly, they had only rested for a few days before such a major incident erupted in Tiantang City all of a sudden. It was an incident that was even more sensational than the dictum of death. For a moment, even Hen Bieli and Hong Zhan truly felt that they did not want them to have a good time. Damn it! This situation clearly doesn't even give me time to rest properly. However, could they not fight for such a priceless treasure? Did they know what speed meant in war? Therefore, all the assassins swarmed in and entered Tiantang City forcefully. As countless assassins swarmed in, it was as if a signal had been lit. The martial world people from all over the place swarmed in with even more exaggerated and undisguised fervor. What? The city gates are not allowed to enter? We want to avoid trouble, we don't have the time to clash with the officials. Can we fly in at night instead of going through the gates? Therefore, for a long time after that, Tiantang City was like a gigantic cauldron while the martial world experts were like dumplings falling from the sky, falling into it one by one. Actually, it wasn't appropriate to call it a dumpling. Had you ever seen a pure black dumpling? The ready-made clothing stores around Tiantang City were all sold out of black fabrics. In just a few days, the price of black, nocturnal garments and Tiantang garments had risen tenfold. In the residence of Yun Yang slowly moved a chair over and sat under the pergola, reading in silence. A gentle breeze blew, causing his purple robe to billow, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. He was completely at ease. His hair fluttered in the wind, and his jade-white face was filled with elegance and grace. You really don't regret it at all? Are you putting on an act, or are you feeling heartache? Ji Lingxi paced around him, Shangguan Lingxiu sitting opposite him. That's the 17th master of the Abyss's Dragonhide treasure map. Tossing it out just like that as bait is a reckless waste of God's gift. What a waste of such a good item. Ji Lingxi expressed her heartache, especially for Yun Yang. If you had gotten your hands on the Dragonhide treasure map and found that place and cultivated the mystical skill within, you might have been able to unlock this red light earlier. That's the legacy of the strongest legend in this world, the 17th master of the Abyss, after all. Ji Lingxi sighed in pity, feeling a little shy at the same time. Yun Yang rolled his eyes and shifted his gaze away from the book to look straight at Ji Lingxi. What can I do by unlocking the red light? Yes. Ji Lingxi uttered the word subconsciously. Suddenly, her neck flushed as she growled, Yun Yang, get up and spar. Ha ha ha. Shengguan Lingxiu, who was standing beside them, could not help guffawing with a flushed face. Yun Yang's words were truly, hearing Shengguan Lingxiu's laughter, Ji Lingxi could no longer care about challenging Yun Yang to a duel. She stomped her feet and dashed into her room, shutting the door behind her. Yun Yang raised his head in confusion. I didn't say anything. Why are you just talking and not practicing? Shengguan Lingxiu rolled her eyes and chased after Ji Lingxi. Didn't say anything? Fine, I'll believe you. What's so great about Little Bai? Strictly speaking, Yun Yang could not be blamed for this. Yun Yang's mind was not on the conversation at all, he was replying almost casually. Most of his thoughts were on the many messages sent by the Nine Heavens dictum. Someone had entered the city, someone from a certain sect had entered the city, someone from a certain sect had arrived a few miles away from Tiantang City and was advancing at an accelerated pace. Tiantang City would turn into a martial world's paradise once night fell. Nightwalkers scurried back and forth as if they were rushing to a market, they did not avoid people at all. In just 4 short days, the dragonhide treasure map that had been in Dong Tianling's hands had changed hands 4 times. It was also because of these 4 transmissions that it had directly or indirectly caused the deaths of no less than 100 martial world practitioners. Every martial world practitioner who had died on the spot had been identified after the incident, and they were all reputable figures. Among them were 3 or 4 experts who were said to have long retired from the martial world, the pinnacle of the world. The treasure map has now changed hands from sky-traversing sword Qing Zishan's hands. Qing Zishan had died in Hong Zhan's hands. However, the secret map had ended up in Cheng Heyun's hands. Right now, Cheng Heyun and his brothers have become the target of public criticism. Cheng Heyun has been confirmed to have been intercepted and killed. 3 of his 4 brothers have also died. Only the second brother, Cheng Mengyun, managed to escape with the secret map in his possession, heavily injured. It has been confirmed that Cheng Mengyun is dead, and the secret map has fallen into the hands of a black-clothed man with a short sword. Based on his movements, he should be the former one-legged bandit Qi Meng Luo, who has retired from the martial world a long time ago. Just like that, the news spread endlessly, layer upon layer. Yun Yang observed carefully with a frown, but he did not give any specific instructions. He was waiting for the news he longed to see to appear. The secret map has fallen into the hands of the Hall of Crimson Blade. Now, the Hall of Crimson Blade's Hong Zhan has joined forces with Hen Bieli. Countless assassins have come from all directions to help and are trapped in the east of the city. The members of the Ma'i sect who have retreated from worldly affairs have appeared 300 miles away from the south gate of Tiantang City. The news Yun Yang had been anticipating had finally arrived. Ma'i sect. A cruel smile hung on the corners of Yun Yang's lips. Have we arrived? In a flash of purple, he had returned to his room. In the next moment, he had already vanished from the room. Chapter 688. Sword, Snow, and Frost were recuperating in the small yard that Yun Yang had arranged for them. Their injuries had long healed and their cultivation base had returned to normal. Even so, they did not make a move despite knowing about the fight for the dragon hide treasure map that had garnered the attention of the world. They were not even interested. What should we do next? I have nothing else in my mind now. I'll retire from the martial world as soon as I repay young Master Yun's kindness. Living a peaceful life is better than anything else. What about the seal on me? I really don't care about the restriction. All I can think about now is to find a good place to bury my bones and invite Saber and Ice over. When the seal is triggered, I'll sever my meridians there and be on my way quietly. As for what happens after death, what happens after death, what happens to the god's bones in my body, those are matters for the future. How can we care so much? If we die, then we die. If we die, then all will be over. Venerable Lord Snow said softly, "That's right. I'm completely disheartened towards the martial world and the human realm. Now, I really don't want to stay a moment longer." Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Frost sighed with their heads lowered. It had only been a few days, but the three of them had become haggard. Each of them looked like they had aged decades. Even when their injuries had healed and their cultivation base had recovered, their condition did not improve at all. They were like three old men lying in their coffins, waiting to take their last breaths. There was no longer any anger to speak of. Before this, I would never have thought that the three venerable lords of the Four Seasons Tower would become like this. Venerable Lord Snow chuckled bitterly in a self-deprecating manner. The battle outside is earth-shattering and bloody, but we can actually chat and drink tea here, thinking of quitting the martial world. Venerable Lord Frost and Venerable Lord Sword chuckled bitterly in unison and sighed deeply. If there's no goal and pursuit in life, this is probably how it is. Our original intention in the past, the organization that we were so loyal to, turns out that it's just, the heart is dead and the person is tired. Even if the body is still alive, it's just a few more breaths. Who would have the patience to care about the martial world's killing? Let those who want to deal with the troubles of the mortal world fight. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Then, Yun Yang walked in with food and wine in his hands. "Young Master Yun is here." The three of them stood up at the same time. From the initial hostility, to disdain, to respect, and finally to gratitude today, the relationship between the three of them and Yun Yang was so complicated that even they could not explain it clearly. "The main purpose of our meeting today is to send off the three of you." Yun Yang smiled and said, "A toast to you, wishing you a free and unfettered life in the secular world from now on." Venerable Lord Snow said faintly, "We appreciate young master's kindness, but it is impossible for us to leave without doing anything." He stared into Yun Yang's eyes and enunciated each word clearly, "What we owe you has to be repaid before we can talk about leaving. Otherwise, even if we hide in the forest, we will still feel indebted to them. If our hearts are uneasy, how can we talk about freedom?" Yun Yang smiled and said, "I have come to seek the help of the three of you. Take it as helping others and helping myself, it is mutually beneficial." The three venerable ones' eyes lit up. "Young master, please speak." "My sect." Yun Yang placed the dishes and wine on the table slowly and said faintly, "You should know where their sect is. What I want the three of you to help with is to remove the Ma'i golden hook from this world. There are no living beings in the headquarters of the Ma'i sect. No living beings have escaped." Yun Yang enunciated each word clearly, "This is what I would like to ask of the three of you." Venerable Lord Snow did not look troubled at all as he agreed immediately, "All right. Leave this to the three of us. Even if the three of us perish, we shall fulfill young master's wish." Perhaps the three venerable lords have misunderstood something. The Ma'i sect's leader, elders, grand elder and the rest, the Ma'i sect's elites have all been mobilized and are on their way to Tiantang City. Yun Yang said, "Of course, I will take care of these people. What I need you to deal with is the portion that remains in the Ma'i sect. Then there's no problem." Venerable Lord Frost said eerily, "The Ma'i sect is destined to be annihilated. A 1,000-year legacy will no longer exist." Yun Yang raised his cup and said with a smile, "Farewell today, we shall never meet again. May the three of you be free and unfettered, untainted by worldly affairs." "Thank you, young Master Yun." The three of them stood up simultaneously and bowed. All four of them understood. After annihilating the Mai sect, it was impossible for Sword, Snow, and Frost to return. Both parties would become strangers and forget each other in the martial world. "Please wait, young Master Yun," said Venerable Lord Snow as he entered the room with Venerable Lord Sword and Venerable Lord Frost. Yun Yang could not help being stunned, unable to figure out why the three of them wanted him to stay. A moment later, he was surprised to hear grunts coming from inside. He could not help but feel even more puzzled. Then, the scent of blood wafted over with the wind. The next moment, Venerable Lord Snow appeared before Yun Yang with a pale face, 3 pieces of bloody bones in his hands. Behind him were Venerable Lord Frost and Venerable Lord Sword, who were also drenched in blood. The trio's gaze was fixated on the bones in Venerable Lord Snow's hands, their gazes extremely complicated. "These 3 bones are what the 3 of us have nourished with our chi, blood, and mystical skill for years, the bone of Snow God, the bone of Sword God, and the bone of Frost God." Venerable Lord Snow said painfully, "Also, this is what young Master Yun gave me last time, the bone of Ice God. These 4 pieces of God's bones are all given to young Master Yun for the future." Yun Yang's mind raced, his scalp tingling from the shock. He stood up abruptly. "What is this for? All of you?" Venerable Lord Snow smiled. "We know that young Master Yun is compassionate. We stand on the same side, of course, you can't bear to see us cripple our bodies. However, the 4 of us are destined to be unable to escape the 4 Seasons Tower's pursuit. These 4 pieces of God's bones are items that the 4 Seasons Tower must retrieve no matter what. However, we're not resigned to it. So we've caused some trouble for young Master Yun before we part ways." Venerable Lord Frost endured the pain but said with a smile, "Young Master Yun is Yutong's nobleman and has great connections with the military. Perhaps you'll have the chance to meet Lord Supreme Cloud in the future. If young Master Yun doesn't want to keep these troublesome items, just hand them to Supreme Cloud when you see him. I believe these bones will be useful to him." Yun Yang nodded. "I know, I understand. However, will your actions affect your combat power?" Venerable Lord Snow said faintly, "I'm afraid we won't need much of our combat power to deal with the Mai sect that has lost all its elites." The 3 of them raised their goblets at the same time. "Young Master Yun, the martial world is fraught with danger. Take care. Take care." Yun Yang emptied his goblet. "We'll take our leave now." The 3 of them simply bandaged their wounds and waved their hands with a smile. They didn't even bring anything with them and just swaggered off. Yun Yang watched the trio's receding silhouettes quietly, his heart filled with emotions. It was as if a piece of the past, a piece of history, had been sealed in his memory with the departure of these 3 people. Take care. Chapter 689. 170 miles ahead will be Tiantang City. There was a troop of more than 100 people on horseback, all of them dressed in hemp garments and wearing tall crowns. One of them spoke loudly as he galloped his horse. "There's no need to be in such a hurry anymore. Although the dragon hide treasure map has appeared, it won't be settled without at least 1,000 or 800 lives." A haggard old man said, "Later, everyone should take a break and conserve your energy. Don't be rash and impulsive when you enter the city. Observe the surroundings first. Don't step into the battlefield and rashly attract too much attention." "You're right, Grand Elder. This is from experience. Reckless impulses will only lead to eternal damnation. There's a small relay station in front. We can rest there for a while." "All right." The group galloped forward at top speed. When he was about 100 feet away from the relay station, the wind and clouds in the sky suddenly surged. A gust of wind suddenly blew without any warning. As the strong wind howled, the dust on the ground danced in the wind. It was like a screen, covering the entire group of people in hemp clothes. Skilled cultivators were able to sense the impending danger. When the Maai sect saw the anomaly, they stopped in unison, their faces solemn as their gazes darted around. Everyone understood one thing. This sudden gust of strange wind was definitely not simple. Which friend has arrived? What can I do for you? The Maai sect's Grand Elder's sunken eyes shone brightly as he spoke in a low voice. Since you're here, please enlighten us in person. Our sect awaits your instruction here. The wind continued to howl, but the surroundings were silent and solemn. Dust billowed in all directions, looking like it was getting more intense. Grass flew in the air as the sky darkened, but no one answered. The Grand Elder's expression darkened as he hollered in a low voice, "Set up the formation, be on guard." If they did not harbor ill intentions, they should have shown themselves after making a small commotion. Since the other party did not appear as they were invited, they must have come with ill intentions. With a soft swoosh, the golden hooks of the 28 Maai sect members shone in unison, and they immediately spread out. Their positions were orderly, and it was obvious that they had great teamwork. As for the rest of the people, they stayed within the first layer of defense. They formed groups of 9 and formed smaller formations, ready to attack at any time to attack the enemy and rescue their friends. In the most central position, there were only the Grand Supreme Elder, the Linen sect leader, and 3 other elders. The 5 of them stayed in the center to coordinate with each other, guarding against any sudden ambushes or special big moves to ensure their safety. The formation was interlinked with each other, echoing inside and outside. It was the 108 Constellations formation that the Maai sect had used to awe the pugilistic world for countless years. As the Maai sect set up their formation, the howling gale intensified. The omnipresent murderous aura thickened as well, as though it had solidified. A look of surprise and solemnity appeared in the Grand Elder's eyes. Who are you? With your skills, how could you use such a trick to hide your head and show your tail? How could a wise man do that? Since you're targeting our sect, why don't you show yourself and have a proper battle? Before the Grand Supreme Elder's voice echoed, a cold laughter came from the wind. Then, a voice rang out leisurely, filling the wind and swaying along with it. It could be heard from far and near. I have no grudge with the world, Maai Golden Hook, untainted by the mundane world, undefiled by the 9 levels of hell. What do the generals, ministers, and nobles have to do with me? Children and grandchildren, remember not to provoke gratitude or enmity. Once a grudge is formed, it will be forever. Once a grudge is formed, it will be forever. Forever, those words were the warning words left behind by the Maai sect's founding ancestor. Ever since the Maai sect's founding ancestor, it had always been regarded as the golden rule, the voice of the sect. Not only did no one dare defy it, even doubting it would result in expulsion from the sect, never to be hired again. Sweat beaded on the Grand Supreme Elder's forehead as he hollered, "Who are you? Come out." In the wind, a voice boomed up and down, left and right, saying faintly, "You're the Maai sect's Grand Supreme Elder, the one they call the Golden Hook King. Wang Chongfeng, am I right?" Wang Chongfeng shut his eyes and said coldly, "You're deliberately mystifying me. Are you bent on becoming our sect's enemy?" The voice in the wind replied faintly, "Whether we're enemies or not is not my decision alone. I'm only asking you, do you still remember the Maai sect's ancestral teachings?" The muscles on Wang Chongfeng's aged face twitched as he said faintly, "The Maai sect's ancestral teachings are our business. It's not up to an outsider like you to ask whether I remember them or not." The voice in the wind chuckled coldly and said, "The world is indeed fickle and people's hearts are not what they used to be. The Maai sect today is filled with people who have forgotten their roots and go against the ancestral teachings. However, do you still remember the consequences of going against the ancestral teachings?" The Maai sect leader bellowed, "Who are you? You keep talking about the Maai sect's ancestral teachings. Who are you to speak out against them?" The voice in the wind said coldly, "I guess you're the Maai sect's current leader, Guzuheng? Your Ma'ai sect members have gone against the ancestral teachings, deceiving their masters and annihilating their ancestors. What kind of punishment do you, as the leader, think they should receive? Guzuheng smirked. Any kind of punishment is fine, but at least it should be taught a lesson by a cowardly person like you. The voice in the air chuckled. It's not a cowardly person's turn to teach a lesson. Well said. Outsiders have no right to interfere with your sect's matters. However, I wonder what will happen if a cowardly person like me annihilates your Ma'ai sect? Guzuheng scoffed angrily. Show yourself if you have the guts. Do you think you can annihilate my Ma'ai sect by playing tricks and fighting with your tongue? Are the martial world full of people like you who only know how to talk? The voice in the wind guffawed, reciting, once a grudge is formed, it ends forever. Once a grudge is formed, it ends forever. Suddenly, the wind and clouds changed again. Golden light flashed, and thunder rumbled in the sky. Then, countless bolts of lightning struck down. Streaks of dancing silver snakes flashed ferociously in the evening sky, descending upon the mortal realm. Boom, 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 it was as if countless explosives were detonated at the same time on the ground. In the blink of an eye, the entire area was covered in flames. The heavenly thunder calamity was earth-shattering. The wind and clouds in the sky grew more intense, surging with a myriad of phenomena. However, the Ma'ai sect was indeed a sect with 1,000 years of heritage. Although they could not help but panic in the face of such a powerful storm and thunder, they raised their golden hooks at the same time. A brilliant golden light shot up into the sky. The formation took on the apocalyptic heavenly thunder calamity head-on. Not a single person perished from the heavenly thunder calamity. The mighty power of the 108 constellations formation lived up to its reputation. It was truly impressive. A sneer came from the sky. Ma'ai sect, those wearing Ma'ai clothes are indeed impressive to be able to withstand the heavenly thunder calamity. The words were filled with mockery. It was obviously saying that the Ma'ai sect should be struck by lightning for disrespecting their ancestral teachings. Guzuheng howled, cowards! Come out! Chapter 690. With a chuckle, the lightning suddenly exploded. The apocalyptic thunder in the sky was endless and relentless, pressuring them continuously. However, the Ma'ai sect gradually steadied their footing after resisting it for a while. The Grand Supreme Elder and the Ma'ai sect leader could clearly tell that while the apocalyptic thunder was powerful and had a continuous effect, it would be difficult to achieve its full effect against a formation like the Ma'ai sects if it could not take down the opponent in one fell swoop. Moreover, it would consume a lot of the caster's spiritual source. No matter how impressive the caster's cultivation base was or how miraculous their skills were, they would not be able to sustain it for a long period of time. The Ma'ai sect would definitely gain the upper hand in the end. After all, the constellation formation was operated by more than 100 people. It was not something a single person could withstand. Just when the Ma'ai sect's higher-ups were confident that their chances of victory had changed, a low cry came from the sky again, retract. Before the voice could echo in the air, many Ma'ai sect members cried out inexplicably. The Grand Elder and the rest looked towards the source of the sound in surprise, only to see a haze of blood rising from the bodies of those who cried out. The haze drifted into the sky and converged to form a blood cloud that shrouded the sky. Although the Ma'ai sect's treasure, the constellation formation, was incredibly powerful and its defensive ability was extraordinary, able to withstand the apocalyptic thunder and keep those within the formation alive, it did not mean that they were uninjured. There was a difference in the cultivation base of the Ma'ai sect disciples who had set up the formation. Many disciples with lower cultivation bases were injured. Although the injuries were not severe and would not affect their combat ability, they were still injured. Faced with the sudden cry of "retract" from the sky, all the injured had lost a great amount of blood from their wounds. The result of losing a large amount of blood in an instant was that they became dizzy and flustered. They had no strength left to spare. In the blink of an eye, the sky was still filled with lightning and thunder, and dozens of people had already been struck to death. It had only been a moment, but the Ma sect's famed constellation formation had already been broken. The sudden change came naturally. The Grand Elder, Wang Changfeng, who had just regained his composure, cried out, "9 Supremes? Yutong's 9 Supremes?" Wind and clouds surged, thunder and lightning intersected, and blood mist filled the air. If Wang Changfeng still couldn't guess who it was, then he didn't need to mingle around anymore. A cold snicker was heard as a grey silhouette appeared in the sky in a flash, speaking faintly. The Ma sect has disobeyed the ancestral teachings and came down the mountain to participate in the dynasty's power struggle. They're digging their own graves. Your sect's ancestral master can't deal with you personally, so I'll do it on his behalf to preserve his reputation. He then howled, "That's right, I am Yutong's 9 Supremes, Supreme Cloud of the 9 Supremes. The clouds shroud the world, judge thy end." Amidst the long roar, a snow-white saber light flashed. He smiled coldly and said, "Originally, I could have killed all of you in secret. However, I was afraid that you would die in confusion, which would make me feel nothing. Therefore, I revealed myself and played with you. I will let you all go to the underworld with no regrets and die in peace." The 9 Supremes of Yutong. It was the 9 Supreme Cloud who had reappeared in the world, carrying out his killing spree. Wang Changfeng and Ge Zuheng's expressions changed drastically once more. At this moment, they felt that the pressure they were enduring was 3 times greater than before. Back then, the ancestral teachings forbade them from participating in the dynasty's power struggle. However, when they learned that Dongxian was the destined ruler and was about to unify Tianxian, they were finally convinced and had sent their elite experts down the mountain to assist. Their intention was to conquer Yutong in one fell swoop and build a national sect in Dongxian. They could then obtain the power of national fortune and lay the foundation of the sect that would never be uprooted. In spite of this, who would have thought that the so-called destined ruler, Dongxian, who had the upper hand, would be defeated? The members of their sect had just joined the army and fought their first battle. Dongxian had been defeated. Until now, there were still some senior officials of Dongxian who held a sour opinion. "If it wasn't for a certain cursed sect, we might have won." Such words were infuriating. In spite of this, the Ma sect could not refute them. Firstly, it was the truth, and secondly, it was meaningless to refute them. Even Dongxuan's emperor, who had initially treated the Ma sect like a distinguished guest, was obviously indifferent towards them. He no longer hated them. If they did not leave, Dongxian might send someone to wipe out the Ma sect. What made the Ma sect completely give up was the impatient words of Dongxuan's emperor, who was the one who suggested asking for the Ma sect's help back then. "What's in your head? Ma sect, wear hemp every day. What kind of person would wear hemp? Only those who die in their family would wear hemp. How dare you invite such an unlucky sect to help? Are you afraid that my army won't be defeated quickly enough?" Ge Zuheng could still remember how he almost spat blood when he heard the words. How could someone speak like that? We've gone against our ancestral teachings for Dongxian and so many of our people have died, yet there's not even a word of comfort. Remember what someone had said back then, "I've waited for all of you to come like seedlings waiting for rain, like winter waiting for warm clothes." Are you complaining that we're disheartened now? Coincidentally, the Dragonhide treasure map incident had broken out in Yutong. After some discussion, they had decided to send their elites over. It would be best if they could get their hands on the map and retreat to the forest to lay low. If they could not, they would retreat to the mountains and live in seclusion. Who would have thought that they would be stopped by Supreme Cloud of Yutong's 9 Supremes just as they arrived outside Tiantang City after traveling thousands of miles? He had even started a killing spree. It was as if the entire sect was going to be annihilated. Lord Supreme Cloud. Wang Changfeng's golden hook glowed as he turned into a golden whirlwind, intercepting the dense saber light that was like a downpour. He called out, "We're a reclusive sect. We've only been involved in the worldly conflict by chance. Now that we've parted ways with Dongxian, we have nothing more to do with it. We've returned to the world. Once this is over, we'll return to the mountains immediately and never come out again. Lord Supreme Cloud, why must you push us too far?" Yunyang chuckled coldly. Push us too far? Skilled cultivators rarely get involved in the wars of the continent's empires. This is Tianxian continent's iron law since the beginning of time. Once involved, the karma must be severed. Think of how many of Yutong's brave men have died in your hands during the Fortress of Resilience. Did any one of us say that you've pushed us too far then? He hollered, since karma has been sown, karma shall be reaped. Since the Ma'ai sect has sown the seed of blood debt, they shall bear the retribution of annihilation. This is the cycle of fate, there's nothing to be said about it. Today is the day of retribution. Everyone from the Ma'ai sect shall be killed without mercy. Amidst his holler, the saber light glowed even brighter as clusters of blades flew out. Yunyang had turned into a cloud of wind that was tangible but intangible, charging into the crowd and killing without restraint. No matter how the Ma'ai sect's men defended and counterattacked, their golden hooks falling like a waterfall, they could only land on his shadow, unable to cause any actual harm to him. It had only been a short while, but wherever Yunyang passed, horses and men were thrown off their feet. Blood splattered everywhere. Wherever he went, people fell one by one. The martial arts and mystical skills that they had painstakingly cultivated were useless against Yunyang's bizarre cultivation method. Wang Changfeng chased after the gray shadow with all his might, attacking and blocking with all his might in an attempt to turn the tide. However, all his attacks and obstructions were futile, just like the rest of the Ma'ai sect's men, as if they were hitting thin air. For a moment, the men and horses were thrown off their feet. Chapter 691. Lord Supreme Cloud. Wang Changfeng suddenly bellowed, "This old man has something to say." His voice was thunderous and deafening, but Yunyang was still weaving in and out like a whirlwind, with no intention of stopping. The strange ambush that had no form or substance, the saber truth, destiny blade that was unrivaled in the world, complemented by the indestructible and indestructible divine edge, in addition to his extreme speed, made him like a dragon in the sea, a tiger roaring deep in the mountains. No one could stop him, killing people like they were chickens. Right now, this place was Yunyang's absolute turf. After 99 consecutive swift slashes, 7 Ma'ai sect disciples were sliced into pieces as if they were being sliced into pieces. His voice drifted over, "Wang Changfeng, speak if you want to. I'm killing, but I can still hear. Your words won't delay my movements. Don't worry." The gray shadow spun and pounced to the other side. Wherever it passed, there was still blood, each wave higher than the one before. Wang Changfeng's heart was dead. The invincible golden hook that had been indestructible in his hands and had helped him kill countless enemies had fallen on Supreme Cloud countless times. From the initial ecstasy, to the confusion, to the futile effort, to the helplessness and despair in the end, all of it proved one thing: he was powerless against Supreme Cloud. The battlefield now was like a group of people going up against a ghost. It looked like they had the advantage in numbers, but the truth was that no matter how capable they were, their attacks were completely useless against the enemy. Watching his disciples die one by one without being able to do anything, the feeling of helplessness was indescribable. The Ma'ai sect had sent 130 people this time, all of them elites. Their original intention was to snatch the Dragonhide treasure map, but more than 40 of them had died before they even reached Tiantang City. In addition, the death toll was still increasing. Supreme Cloud's saber light was like snow, shining brightly. Each time it flickered, a ray of blood flew. Supreme Cloud. Supreme Cloud. Please stop. I have something to say. Gu Zuheng and Wang Changfeng's hair was disheveled, and their faces were deathly pale. They cried out in succession, their voices filled with grief. If they had initially harbored the thought of retaliating and killing Supreme Cloud, they had long lost their initial intentions after witnessing the scene and the helplessness they felt after experiencing it for themselves. It was really impossible to kill it. Also, looking closely at Supreme Cloud's attack strength, he was at least at the 5th level of the Dao realm. In the entire Mai sect, there were only a few people who were above Dao realm stage 5. However, even these people, including himself, could only scatter a puff of smoke when they went up against Supreme Cloud, no matter what power or arcane technique they used. If he used too much strength, he might even hit his own people on the other side. They really wanted to negotiate and even beg for mercy, but the other party didn't even give them the chance to beg for mercy. It was just killing blindly. It was obvious that what the other party had said from the start of his attack to wipe out everyone in the Mai sect was not empty talk. Instead, he was putting his words into action and it was effective, and he was realizing it step by step. Everyone, scatter and escape. Every single one of you who escapes counts. Wang Changfeng hollered, his old eyes already glistening with tears. With his experience and knowledge, how could he not tell that even if the strategy of scattering and escaping was successful, there would not be many who could escape in the end when faced with such an enemy? The Mai sect had lost all of its elites in this battle. Unexpectedly, just as the Mai sect's people scattered to fight and escape for their own lives, Yunyang suddenly howled. Wisps of ghastly fog rose from the area around the battlefield. The ghastly fog rose from all directions, covering the sky and earth, forming a complete encirclement in an instant. For a moment, their ears were filled with the cries of ghosts, as if they were in the underworld of Azura. An eerie voice spoke faintly, "Everyone has arrived at the Temple of the Dark Azura. Who can still escape?" More than a dozen indistinct figures appeared in the nether fog. Each and every one of them wore a tall crown in the clouds and fog. Their gazes were cold and murderous. Wang Changfeng and the others' already chilled hearts grew even colder. The concourse of the underworld. The 10 kings of the concourse of the underworld had arrived at the same time. How could they break out of the encirclement when faced with such a force? Did the heavens want to end the Mai sect? After the 10 Yama kings appeared, they did not make a move, only watching Yunyang's massacre from afar. However, the Mai disciples who attempted to break out of the encirclement were all killed. With these 10 people blocking the way, the Mai disciples could not break out of the encirclement. Supreme Cloud. What happened back then was indeed our Mai sect's violation of our ancestral teachings. We deserve it. However, that was the decision of our higher-ups, it has nothing to do with our disciples. They were only forced by their teachers' strict orders and had no choice but to do so. The Mai sect's leader, Gu Zuheng, cried out loudly, "Let these disciples go and this old man and the others will give their lives to you. We'll never resist, we'll be at your mercy. Lord Supreme Cloud, please be merciful and let these innocent disciples leave." Wang Changfeng's golden hook was already placed against his neck as he roared, "Supreme Cloud. Do you hear me? Just say the word and this old man will give his life to you." Yunyang's faint voice was devoid of any emotion as he said faintly, "Heavens will reincarnate, who has the heavens ever spared?" That day, dozens of Mai sect's ace cultivators entered the army and massacred Yutong's soldiers with their tyrannical martial strength. In the end, tens of thousands of people died in your hands, directly or indirectly. The fall of the Fortress of Resilience is largely due to your intervention. Millions of brothers are watching me. Yunyang said faintly, "Their heroic souls aren't far away, they're still hovering above Tiantang City. I can feel their gazes clearly on my back. They're urging me to avenge them." With a flash of gray, Yun Yang's gaze shot out from the thick fog like two bolts of lightning. At this moment, at this very day, there are so many debts of blood and life. How can the lives of the few of you be able to bear it? Can you? Even if the entire Mai sect is annihilated, it's still not enough. It's far from enough. Yun Yang said faintly, I've said it just now. Skilled cultivators are strictly forbidden from interfering with the wars of the continent's empires. This has been Tianxian continent's iron law since the beginning of time. If you're involved, the karma must be severed. To think that Yutong has been waging war on the battlefield for so many years and the sects have never participated. You've disobeyed your ancestors' teachings and joined in, becoming Yutong's enemy. If you can still leave your legacy in the end, won't it make more people feel lucky? Mai sect. Yun Yang hollered, today, it shall be annihilated. Wang Changfeng and Guzuheng guffawed, Mai sect, Mai sect. Both of them looked at each other with tears in their eyes, speechless. Their words had come to an end, there was really no need to continue. Supreme Cloud's determination was as unshakable as a towering mountain. Chapter 692. Ancestral Teaching. Ancestral Teaching. Wang Changfeng shrieked, how can I, Wang Changfeng, face the Mai sect's ancestors in the underworld? Suddenly, he charged towards Yun Yang and roared, Supreme Cloud, this old man hands this life of mine to you. If you have the guts, come with me. Before his words echoed in the air, he charged into the clouds and self-destructed. With a loud boom, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Wang Changfeng had turned into a cloud of blood mist. He was dead, his body and soul destroyed. After the explosion, a cloud of mist formed in the wind. Yun Yang's saber glinted with a crimson gleam once more. Is there anyone else who wants to take me away? Why not try? It'll save me a lot of trouble. Guzuheng heaved a long sigh and committed suicide, following in Wang Changfeng's footsteps. About the time it took to brew 2 cups of tea had passed. A total of 136 people from the Mai sect had perished. The sect had been annihilated, with no survivors left. Blood dyed the ground red, converging into rivers of blood. Yun Yang and the 10 Yama kings left quietly, leaving a mess on the ground that was left uncleaned. A stone tablet stood there majestically. 136 people from the Mai sect have been slain here. The Mai sect has disobeyed the ancestral teaching and intervened in the war between 2 empires. Yutong's warriors hate them. Yutong's Supreme Cloud has struck today to annihilate their sect and their people. Those who offend Yutong shall be punished no matter how far away they are. There were some introductions at the bottom, detailing the beginning and end of the incident clearly. It was signed, Yutong's Supreme Cloud has erected this tablet to pay tribute to the loyal souls, to pacify the people, to warn the world, to warn the martial world. This line of inscription was filled with murderous intent. His tone was even more arrogant. However, everyone who saw this stone tablet did not think that it was arrogant at all. It was as if everything that had happened was a matter of course. Anyone who saw this stone tablet couldn't help but be shocked. The stone tablet stood tall, facing the morning sun. The stench of blood that lingered for dozens of miles, lingering for a long time. Not long after, passers-by finally passed by. When they saw the inscription on the stone tablet, their hearts raced and their hair stood on end. Then, thunderous cheers followed, filled with endless relief. It's Lord Supreme Cloud. This is Lord Supreme Cloud avenging our soldiers. All hail Lord Supreme Cloud. With Lord Supreme Cloud here, let's see who in this world dares to look Yutong in the eye. In Tiantang City. Following Yun Xiaoyao's command, the military and the government worked together to seal off the entire east side of the city. This time, the strength of the blockade was unprecedentedly high. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It wasn't just a simple action, but all the civilians who could be moved out of the eastern part of the city. The Empire of Yutong has decreed that the Emperor has no intention of interfering in the martial world's affairs, but the martial world strictly forbids the slaughter of Yutong's people. The east side of the city was temporarily unguarded. Only the east side of the city, and only for 7 days. 7 days later, martial artists who have entered Yutong are to leave on their own. Those who stay beyond the time limit will be considered to have violated Yutong's laws and will be punished severely. Within this unique period of time, Yutong officials will collect the bodies of those martial artists who have unfortunately passed away and send their remains back to their homes, returning them to their roots. As long as there are valuables, you must not touch them. If there are any violators, Yutong shall hunt them down with all its might without mercy. The officials issued an official statement, clearly expressing Yutong's imperial court's attitude. Fight all you want, we know we can't stop you. We might as well designate a place for you to play in the east side of the city. We've actually made rules to allow all of you to have fun. This is already giving you face. Under such circumstances, if the rules were to be broken, there would be no room for discussion and no one would be able to play anymore. We respect you all, so we'll set aside a place for you. If you all respect us as well, we'll take care of the aftermath no matter who dies. When you die, your belongings will be sent to your home as well. However, if you don't respect us, once the edict was announced, the martial artists who had entered Tiantang City seemed to scoff at it on the surface, but in the midst of battle, they had all obeyed, whether intentionally or not. Even those who had always been mysterious still chose to wear things that represented their identity and origins on their bodies. They were all sensible people. They thought that they were the chosen ones, the lucky ones, the ones who obtained the Dragon Hide's secret tome this time. With so many pinnacle experts gathered here, accidents could easily happen. No matter how high their cultivation base was, there was no guarantee that no accidents would happen. Since Yutong's officials had promised to take care of the aftermath, they would definitely do it. This was much more reliable than the usual martial world promises. After all, no one could guarantee that they would not lose their lives here. However, since the officials had made such a promise, they would definitely do it. If they could not do it, or even if they did not do it properly and caused others to criticize them, it would mean that the promise to the world's heroes had failed. It would be a severe blow to Yutong's official reputation. Of course, the assassins were unwilling. Were they not pushing them to the edge of a cliff by doing so? What would they do if the civilians were to be moved out? Therefore, they were doing everything they could to stop Yutong's officials from moving. However, all the martial artists had seized this opportunity as well. If you want to stop the migration, of course, you have to show yourselves. Then, we'll follow the migrating army. If you come out to stop us, we'll set up a trap to kill you. Yutong's official experts, led by Yun Xiaoyao, were here as well. If the assassins appeared to stop the migration, they would be attacked by both Yutong's officials and the martial world's experts. After more than a dozen clashes, the assassins suffered heavy losses and finally gave up on the plan. Yutong's officials followed the rules as well. If you don't stop the migration, we won't do anything. As a result, the assassins actually felt the pressure on them lighten considerably. After all, Yutong's officials were the local tyrants, they were all too familiar with the terrain. If the assassins did not move, the martial world's people would not move either. You have to conserve your energy, we have to wait for more people to come as well. Secretly, there were quite a number of people who were guiding the martial world's actions. Everyone felt that it was extremely reasonable. No matter what, this Dragon Hide treasure map must not be left in the assassins' hands. They're too powerful. Once they break out, they won't be able to get it back. Therefore, we have to work together and annihilate the assassins first. Snatching the treasure map is the best plan. Once we snatch it in the future, we'll just do what we can. Everyone felt that it was all very reasonable. Therefore, Yun Xiaoyao would send people in to collect the corpses every once in a while. All the members were ordinary soldiers. A few thousand of them went in at once to search for the corpses along the way. The countless ace cultivators in the entire eastern district turned a blind eye to them, as if they did not see them. No one even laid a finger on these ordinary soldiers. Even when they greeted them occasionally, it was done out of goodwill. Those who were rich would even give some money to express their gratitude. The underlying meaning was, "Brother, if you find me lying here one day, please put in more effort on account of the money I've given you today. Take care of those broken arms and legs for your brother." Chapter 693. Just like that, the corpses were found and taken away. Many of the corpses were unidentifiable. Some of the soldiers mustered their courage and hollered at the top of their lungs, "Does anyone know this fellow? Come out and help identify him." After the hollering, most of the martial world people would rush over to help identify the corpses. The martial world was a matter of the martial world. Even if there was a grudge between them, there were rarely people who would target the corpses of their enemies. Of course, the people who came to help were not the kindest of people, nor was it because they had a high level of awareness. It was because everyone had the same thought: what if one day, the one lying on the ground would be me? Later on, when the soldiers came to collect the corpses, they would always attract complicated gazes. This was the first time in history that the government and the martial world had gotten along so peacefully. Although the martial world heroes were stubborn and unruly, they had developed a deep fondness for Yutong this time. No matter what, Yutong had given the fallen martial world brothers a chance to return to their roots. No matter what, it was a debt of gratitude. Men and women of the martial world were quick with gratitude and vengeance. If there were to be complaints or even resentment towards Yutong's decision, it would probably be the assassins. The current situation was almost equivalent to the alliance of the world's assassin organizations against the entire martial world. The dragon hide treasure map that had appeared in Dong Tianling's possession was now in the hands of the Hall of Crimson Blades Hongzhan. The owner of the dictum of death, Hen Bieli, was Hongzhan's sworn elder brother. It was also because of the emergence of the highest token in the assassin world that most of the world's ace assassins had gathered here. Today, they had basically been recruited by the two top assassin organizations. After the world's assassins had ambushed the Four Seasons Tower, other than those who had died and a small portion who had left, the rest of the assassins who had come to Tiantang City had basically been recruited by the two top assassin organizations. The recruited assassins were originally solo assassins who were rather reputable. Many of them were unwilling to be recruited, but Hen Bieli had the dictum of death in his possession. Furthermore, he was the second-ranked assassin organization in the Tianxian continent. The benefits of being recruited were obvious. Of course, the most important reason was that the Four Seasons Tower seemed to have emerged victorious when the world's assassins had attacked. Other than the Four Seasons Tower's three venerable lords, the rest of them had been annihilated. However, with the Four Seasons Tower's style, they would never let the matter rest so easily. With the Hall of Crimson Blade as their backing, there was no lack of thoughts of having a strong backing. However, who would have thought that all of a sudden, Hongzhan would become the current owner of the Dragon Hide treasure map by chance? At the same time, because of this matter, many assassins would be surrounded by countless martial artists. Initially, Hongzhan was a little dumbfounded when he received the treasure map. He was just trying. It was really just a test. In the end, for some unknown reason, that guy was unexpectedly injured by someone and was on the verge of death, waiting for him to receive him. Hongzhan felt like he was dreaming as he held the two Dragon Hide treasure maps in his hand. So easy? However, then, a loud roar came from nowhere. The treasure map is in Hongzhan's hands. We can't let him get away. Hongzhan raised his saber and gave chase, but he did not see a single shadow. In spite of this, within a short hour, the fact that Hong Zhan had obtained the dragon hide treasure map was known to everyone. Hong Zhan wanted to leave immediately, but he was pinned down here, unable to move. He had a clearer understanding of the current situation. He knew that it was impossible for him to protect the treasure map with his own strength. The danger of destruction was right before his eyes. Therefore, he took a relatively smart approach. He immediately found Hen Bieli and gathered all the assassins whose cultivation base was 3rd level and above together. They would share blessings and misfortunes together. The dragon hide treasure map belonged to everyone. As long as the treasure was found, everyone would have a share. Everyone would have the chance to become the next 17th young master of the abyss. With such great benefits before them, the high-ranking assassins swore an oath of blood, swearing by heaven that they would live and die together, advance and retreat together. Hen Bieli said then, "Now that we've gathered all the forces of both our families, there's no one or force in this world that can snatch the dragon hide treasure map from us. Even if the Four Seasons Tower were to come again, there's nothing to fear. As long as we work together, not only can we escape, but we'll also have a great chance of finding the treasure. As long as we don't give up and move forward bravely, I believe that not only can our 2 assassin organizations do as they please in the mortal realm, we'll still be a mighty force that can sweep everything away when we ascend to heaven. Perhaps 10 years or 100 years later, we'll possess the power to change this continent. Even this part of the universe will be ruled by us. Today will be the beginning of this legend." His words were beautifully spoken and extremely tempting. Most importantly, the pact this time was witnessed by heaven's oath. Whether it was Hen Bieli or Hong Zhan, they dared not violate it. Once the pact was made, it was a fact that was set in stone. The assassins who participated in the pact this time were all prideful individuals. Any one of them was a formidable character who had roamed the martial world for decades. Everyone agreed with Hen Bieli's words. Honestly, Hong Zhan, Hen Bieli, and the other assassins were not mistaken. After all, almost all the top-notch assassins in this world were here. What force in this world could possibly stand against them? Therefore, everyone did not hesitate. They collectively swore to heaven's oath to protect the treasure map with their lives. To share blessings and bear misfortunes together. To be in the same boat and weather the storm together. Then, the Assassins' Alliance was in the same boat. They really did it. However, to be able to weather the storm together, as time passed, the assassins gradually realized that this ordeal seemed to be very difficult to overcome. There were tens of thousands of martial world people arriving every day in Tiantang City. There were countless experts appearing and disappearing every day. The entire east side of the city had now become a carnival ground for the martial world people. It was truly a place where bandits could be seen and rogues could be seen. Robbers could be seen everywhere and assassins could be seen. The east side of the city was filled with Jianghu people. It was so packed that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Too many Jianghu people surrounded the area like an iron bucket. That's not right. Calling it an impregnable fortress was no longer sufficient to describe the current situation. Perhaps, it should be said that if Yutong's Fortress of Resilience had had the help of such a force back then, forget about one Han Sanha, even if there were 10 or 100 Han Sans, it would have been futile. Originally, the Assassin Alliance's judgment of the current situation should have been, we don't know military affairs, we don't know how to command, we don't know how to fight, we don't know the art of war, we don't know how to strategize, and we don't know anything about military affairs. However, this actually didn't matter. That's because we can force our way through. When there's a huge disparity in combat power between the two sides, the influence of intelligence will be negligible. Assassins are the best at assassination. No matter how powerful the target was, if one was not enough, he would send 10, if 10 were not enough, he would send 1,000. If 1,000 were not enough, he would send 100,000. Would it work or not? Are you convinced or not? Even if you were Ling Xiaozue or Dugu Chou, could you withstand the joint attack of a sea of assassins? What was more, there were so many martial world people gathered here. Even though there were many of them, they were not united. It would be difficult for them to achieve anything. Therefore, if they were to fight each other, there was a real possibility that the two assassin leaders would find an opening to escape from Tiantang City. Today is our leader's birthday. Let us wish Jin Liang a happy birthday and eternal happiness. Jin Liang has been a member of the Feng family since the time of the evil lord. Until he reached the proud era, the heaven domain, and finally the supreme honor, he has always been our core brother. Chapter 694. In spite of this, there were many experienced martial artists on the side. How could they not see the crux of the matter? It was true that the assassin's individual killing ability was unparalleled and difficult to fight, but they had the absolute advantage in numbers. As long as they did not act recklessly and advanced slowly, the outcome would be different. Furthermore, there was an invisible force that used all sorts of rumors and methods to transmit these strategies and tactics to everyone's ears. Based on such strategies and tactics, the martial artists maintained a slow advance. And the result of this was, tens of thousands of assassins were trapped on the other side. It was impossible for them to escape. To break out of the encirclement, Hen Bieli had organized dozens of ambushes, but it was completely futile. All of them were casualties and manpower depleted. There were casualties on both sides. The assassins suffered at least thousands of casualties every day, while the martial artists were dying as well. The number of people who died each day was much more than the assassins. In spite of this, the number of martial artists was too great. There were still reinforcements for those who died, and more people came to replace them. The total military strength was growing day by day, while the assassins had no source of support. One death meant one less. The disparity in strength between both sides was growing wider. The stench of blood could be smelled clearly in Yutong's palace, even from half the city away. After 7 to 8 days, the east of Yutong had completely turned into a ghostly realm, a bloody hell. If it were not for Yutong's soldiers who went in a few times a day to collect the corpses, the plague would have spread long ago. In these days, the common people in the east of the city had migrated out like they were fleeing from a famine. The holdouts who refused to leave no matter how the soldiers tried to persuade them were now crawling out even if their legs were broken. Oh my God, it was terrifying. The soldiers, on the other hand, were reveling in the misfortune of others. One day, Tai Zheng suddenly received a confidential letter. There were only a few words in the letter. Are you stupid? You only know how to complain about being poor every day. Why don't you seize this opportunity to make a fortune? What are you waiting for? So many martial artists are trapped in the east of the city. Are they not going to eat or drink? Tai Zheng felt that it was. It made sense. This was like a wake-up call for someone who was dreaming. Therefore, he immediately sent soldiers in to do business, selling wine, meat, vegetables, steamed buns, and all sorts of food. It was very convenient. It was not known whether it was reasonable or expected, but the business was booming. Even though everything on sale was 10 times more expensive than outside, the Jianghu masters were all eager to buy them, spending a fortune without changing their expressions. At this time in the land, they could be in danger at any time, so why should they care about money? Maintaining full stamina was the most important thing. Wasn't it just 10 times more expensive? Don't worry. I want it. Usually, after the purchase, they would give a lot of money as a reward. In the face of life and death, wealth was just a worldly possession. However, this made things even worse for the assassins on the other side. Yutong's military food business did not prohibit the killers from buying it. Anyone in the east side of the city could buy it, but the current situation was that the killers were being oppressed by countless martial artists and dared not come out at all. When the food arrived, the assassins also wanted to eat. They wanted to eat a hot meal, so they could only gather their elites to escort them out to buy it. He had killed his way out, bought it, and then killed his way back. He had gone through a lot of trouble, which was definitely not normal. Often, hundreds of people would run out to buy steamed buns, but in the end, not a single steamed bun could be seen. These hundreds of people would also be gone. In fact, many high-level assassins were equipped with spatial rings, which more or less contained supplies, so they wouldn't starve to death. But this was also not a normal method. The reality now was that there were more and more martial artists, but there were fewer and fewer assassins. Every time they tried to break out of the encirclement, they were pushed back by the other party as if their lives depended on it. Was it not good to be here? Of course, they had to fight for their lives. If we die here, we can still be sent back. Why are you all running? If you run somewhere else and break the rules, everyone will be out of luck, you know? That would be a true death without a burial ground. You bunch of detestable killers. Do you want me to die without a burial ground? This was what truly drove the assassins to tears. Hen Bieli had slimmed down over the past few days. He looked like a skeletal spirit, bony and bony. Yutong's imperial court. They're obviously planning to use the martial world's manpower to wipe out the world's assassins in one fell swoop. After this battle, there won't be any more assassins in this world. The so-called Assassins' League is destined to vanish into thin air. Hen Bieli looked at Hong Zhan, his eyes filled with deep exhaustion. Hong Zhan, think about it carefully. Have you really fallen for their trap? It seemed like this was a trap specifically targeted at assassins. What Hen Bieli could not figure out was who could be so capable as to dig such a huge trap. Hong Zhan tugged at his hair, feeling wronged. Big brother, look. This dragonhide treasure map is genuine. Can it be fake? He took out the treasure map and placed it before everyone, allowing them to come closer and appraise it. After a round of appraisal, the group came to a unanimous conclusion: this was definitely the real deal. It was genuine, without a trace of fakery. In spite of this, it was even more intriguing. We're all decisive people, but let me ask you, who would be willing to use this to dig a trap? Hong Zhan was so depressed that he almost committed suicide. Big brother, if it were you, would you be willing to do it? Even if it were Ling Xiaozue or Dugu Chou, would he be willing to do it? Hen Bieli burned and hacked at the map to verify it. This was the 5th time he had confirmed that this thing was real. Everyone in the Assassins' League agreed that Hong Zhan was right. Who would be willing to use such a treasure to dig a trap? Unless there was something wrong with their brains? In spite of this, what was going on with the current situation? Was it a coincidence of fate, a coincidence formed by various specific factors, or perhaps it was a chain reaction formed by some other reason? Thoughts ran wild, but it was hard to come to a conclusion. It was true that the imperial court had a plan, but behind the many Jianghu people outside, there must be someone behind the scenes helping to add fuel to the fire. There might even be an organizer. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to be so united. But what exactly was the problem? He really couldn't figure it out no matter how he thought about it. The wind howled high in the sky, the clouds were thick. In the dark of night, the clouds hung low. The weather looked like it was going to snow, but it also looked like it was going to rain. In short, the sky was covered in dark clouds, a storm was coming. The strong wind spiraled back and forth, whimpering endlessly. Yun Yang melted into the clouds in the sky, watching Yutong's East District coldly. Everything that had happened so far was going according to plan, and everything was going according to plan. Just like what Hong Zhan had said, as well as what Hen Bieli and the rest of the Assassins' League were thinking, how could anyone be willing to give up the treasure map that involved the legacy of the world's strongest legend, the 17th Master of the Abyss. Even Ling Xiaozue, Dugu Chou, the Four Seasons Tower's Mr. Nian, god of wine Gu Chaoyang, and god of wine Feng Xianga would find it difficult to give up such a treasure so easily. There was no cultivator in this world who could resist the temptation of this legacy. What they did not know was that there was one person in this world who could resist this temptation. Not only had he resisted it, but he had also used this temptation to its fullest extent, throwing it away without hesitation, creating an extreme confrontation between the countless martial world people and the Assassins' League. There was no room for negotiation now. The annihilation of the Assassins' League was only a matter of time, but this outcome was secondary to Yun Yang. Chapter 695. The main reason why Yun Yang had not hesitated to use the two treasure maps as a price for his plot this time was to attract the sects that were involved in the war between the two empires and annihilate them, just like how he had targeted the Mai sect. He would kill the chicken to warn the monkeys in the bloodiest and most extreme way. He had to make it so that no one would dare forget and no one would dare to offend him. In the future, when the two empires fight for hegemony, you martial artists sects had better behave yourselves. The war between empires is not something you can meddle in. Yun Yang believed that after this incident, there would be at least 90% fewer martial artist sects who would dare to participate in the next war. Not many sects would be able to fight for worldly glory and wealth against the fate of annihilation. Yun Yang's second goal, or rather, a deeper goal, was Ouyang Xiaoxi. This person was the person whom Yun Yang hated the most in this world, second only to the Four Seasons Tower's higher-ups. Ouyang Xiaoxi had a dragon-hide treasure map in his possession, and the original owner of the map was old Dugu. Since he had one, then the attraction of the two secret maps in this world must be much greater to him than to anyone else. Therefore, he would definitely come. As long as Ouyang Xiaoxi came, he would definitely die here. There would not be a second outcome. After all, Tiantang City was like a vast net that had no loopholes. Old Dugu had been waiting underground for too long. It was time to settle this score. Therefore, the current situation, killing all the world's assassins here was only one of the secondary goals of Yun Yang's plot. Whether they were recruited by the Crown Prince or the Prince, they would all be killed. He would completely cut off all external connections so that they would not be able to do anything and would cease to exist. It was because of this that he had been loitering in the sky for the past few days, observing the current situation. He did not even care about the plan. He had long decided to go to the residence of 9 Supremes once the 9 Supremes' power had recovered. After all, there were plenty of opportunities to improve his ability, but if he could not kill Ouyang Xiaoxi, he would not be able to see him again in this vast sea of people. Shui Wuin's massive intelligence network had been mobilized in full force. Now, Shui Wuin dared to tell Yun Yang, even if a mosquito flies into Tiantang City, I can tell you if it's male or female. However, after such a long time, there was still no news about Ouyang Xiaoxi. Yun Yang frowned. No matter how careful Ouyang Xiaoxi is, it would be difficult for him to realize that this is a trap targeted at him. The fact that he possesses the Dragonhide treasure map is a top secret, and it's impossible that he wouldn't be tempted by the sudden appearance of these two pieces. There must be a reason why he didn't appear. Then, in the future, put more attention on the person who came in disguise. Shui Wuin expressed his helplessness. Even if the people who had disguised themselves could not be identified at a glance, they were still highly recognizable. Basically, they were all recorded. However, to find out who was Ouyang Xiaoxi among these people was another matter altogether. It could be said that it was extremely difficult. However, just because it was extremely difficult didn't mean that it was impossible. Moreover, no matter how difficult it was, it had to be carried out. It had to be carried out, and it had to be completed. Ouyang Xiaoxi, skinny, white hair, slightly balding, but not serious. The crow's feet on his face are especially severe, and there's a saber mark at the corner of his mouth. There's a black mole under his chin. His eyebrows are broken, he's always stooped, and he coughs habitually before killing. He's 6.5 feet tall, and he wears a gray robe all year round. He speaks with the accent of someone from Zio's capital city. His famed weapon is the sleeve blade, his used hidden weapons are the sword under his feet, the bow-back needle, the hair dart. Ouyang Xiaoshi's information was being refined day by day. Finally, Shui Wuyin concluded, regarding old Dugu's incident, Supreme Cloud's forceful strike in the empire of Zio's capital, Zilong City, caused the empire of Zio to be in a state of decline ever since that battle. It was also the starting point of the four-nation siege. Old Dugu and Yutong's 9 supremes are related, and it's a very deep connection. I believe that everyone in this world knows about it, so it's impossible that Ouyang Xiaoxi doesn't. Therefore, to Ouyang Xiaoxi, the empire of Yutong and Tiantang City are his forbidden grounds. They are places that he must never touch. Once he does, he'll lose his life at every turn, and he's in a precarious situation. Based on this reason, it's still uncertain whether Ouyang Xiaoxi will really come. After all, no matter how important a treasure is, it's definitely not as important as one's life, especially when there are only 2 pieces of the Dragonhide treasure map. Even if he manages to get his hands on it, he'll only be able to collect 3 pieces, which is less than half of the total treasure map. The attractiveness of the treasure map will be reduced further. Yunyang nodded. His gaze was deep as he said, "Your thoughts are only the thoughts of an ordinary person. Ouyang Xiaoxi will definitely come." Shui Wuyin was bewildered. Yunyang stood up and said faintly, "When old Dugu was massacring the generals and high-ranking officials of various countries, it's impossible for Ouyang Xiaoxi, as his best friend, not to know that old Dugu was related to the 9 supremes, and that their relationship was extremely close. At that time, the entire continent knew that someone from the 9 supremes was still alive. There's no reason that Ouyang Xiaoxi didn't know about it. But he still laid his murderous hands on old Dugu for the sake of a treasure map. Even if it's only a corner of the treasure map. Now, there are 2 pieces here. Combined with his piece, although there are only 3 pieces, it's already half of the map. Furthermore, if I'm not mistaken, there's a great chance that Ouyang Xiaoxi has another piece of the Dragonhide treasure map in his hands. Yunyang smiled. If it's just 2 pieces of the treasure map, it's useless in the hands of most people, or perhaps the effect is minimal. However, if one has 3 or 4 pieces of the treasure map at the same time, perhaps they can get a rough idea and find some clues. Especially in the eyes of those experienced martial artists who have traveled the world for who knows how many years, they might already be able to find the place. This is almost foreseeable, the hope of ascending to the heavens in a single bound. Since his previous success, Ouyang Xiaoxi must have formed a desire for the Dragonhide treasure map and gone completely mad. How can he give up just like that? Even if he knows that this city is a sea of fire and a mountain of daggers, he'll still have to come in and take a look. Yunyang's eyes glinted coldly as he gritted his teeth and said, "The most urgent task now is to keep the 2 pieces of the treasure map in the hands of the assassins and trap them in the city's east for a long time. Even if we have to pay a certain price in the end, we must trap and kill all of these assassins here. As long as these assassins don't die, as long as this dispute remains, everything will suffice. Only when this opportunity remains, will there be the greatest chance for Ouyang Xiaoxi to show himself. Find Ouyang Xiaoxi at all costs." Yunyang issued his final order. As long as Ouyang Xiaoxi doesn't die, Tiantang's dispute will never end. With everything we have, this trap must not end. Since the Dragonhide treasure map has been released, the plan must not be terminated until the goal is achieved. The longer it takes, the more advantageous it is for Yutong. The longer it takes, the harder it will be for Ouyang Xiaoxi to hide. I'm not a saint, but my goal must be achieved. Chapter 696. The battle in the east side of Tiantang City was getting more and more intense, and the commotion it caused was getting bigger as well. The entire east side of the city was basically a wasteland, a scene of devastation. Faced with such a cruel situation, the martial world heroes could not help but feel anxious. However, it was at this moment that a discussion arose. Every day in the martial world is a life and death struggle. Either you fight for 1,000 years of fame and become a legend for generations to come. Or you die early and reincarnate. 18 years later, you'll be a hero again. Who doesn't want to be a god or a saint in the martial world? Now, the opportunity is right in front of me. Why should I give it up? The treasure was born with me and appeared at the right time. I should be the destined master. Which of the martial world's big shots didn't have a fortuitous encounter when they started out? Why can't it fall on me? You can leave if you want. I won't leave anyway. What's the difference between risking my life in the Jianghu and risking my life here? Why should I leave? Isn't this the martial world? Humans are in the martial world, where isn't? If I die here, I might die a worthy death, and I can leave happily. Initially, as the death toll increased, many of the martial world's people began to give up. Although the martial world was filled with passionate people and self-righteous people, there were also many who were smart and ambitious. However, it was at this time that an unusual discussion arose, evoking the ambition and resonance of most of the people. Yes, how could it not be a life and death struggle? Was it not a life and death struggle everywhere? At this moment, an old Jianghu man sighed with emotion. Then, the word spread like the wind throughout the entire east side of Yutang City. Medicine is poison if it doesn't become a pill, but man will eventually become ashes if he doesn't become a god. Medicine was 30% poison. Only when it was refined into a real immortal pill through heaven's will and the poison was completely removed could it be completely absorbed by the human body and be harmless. If man did not become a god, he would only become a pile of ashes in the end. Now, the possibility of refining an immortal pill and becoming a god was right in front of him. Retreat? Perhaps taking a step back could guarantee a moment of safety, but the future would be unpredictable. Yunyang floated in the air, carefully inspecting each and every person. Over the past few days, he had secretly investigated no less than 3,000 people, but he still could not find any clues about Ouyang Xiaoxi. Within the entire East City area, all the suspects that matched Ouyang Xiaoxi's physique had been investigated, but the search was fruitless. If I were Ouyang Xiaoxi, what would I do? Yunyang stopped his search and questioned himself, thinking in reverse. If I were Ouyang Xiaoxi, I would have betrayed Old Dugu, and Old Dugu is closely related to the Nine Supremes. Although Supreme Cloud of the Nine Supremes had never shown his face, he was an influential figure in the Empire of Yutang. Tiantang City, in particular, is under their absolute control. However, these two treasure maps have appeared in Tiantang City. I have to go and try to obtain them. Then how do I get there? How do we proceed? Disguising myself and changing my appearance is a must. But how could he disguise himself to ensure his own safety? Which route should we take? Supreme Cloud must have grasped all the relevant information about me now, so everything about me will be his focus. If I don't want to be discovered and associated with him, the only way is to go in the opposite direction of all the relevant clues. Only then can I avoid suspicion. This includes my accent, habits, clothing, appearance, weapons, and so on. Indeed, only by going in the opposite direction of all the original information could he be completely rid of suspicion. Even if everything has been changed, it's still not an absolute guarantee. The Yutang officials have gone through so much trouble to draw out a city area for the martial artists to wage war. How could there be no deeper meaning behind this? Even if it looks like it's convenient on the surface, limiting the war to a certain area, who knows if it's not a smokescreen? What's more, it's a deliberate attempt to narrow the search area. If I were to come, how could I not participate in the fight for the Dragon Hide treasure map? I would definitely be in the East City area. If that's the case, I can't go to the East City area at all costs. The other party has set up such a scheme, even using the Dragon Hide treasure map as bait. What they're after must be something big. Although I'm the target, I'm probably only one of them. In other words, the fight for the treasure map won't end anytime soon. I can lie low in the other districts first. As long as I pay attention to the current news, I can judge the direction of the situation. I'll wait until the last moment, when the situation is about to be settled, then I'll go out. Not only will I be in perfect condition, I'll also be able to wait for the enemy to attack me. Only then will the danger be minimized and I can protect myself to the greatest extent. Besides, the chance of success will be greater. Lastly, if things really can't be done, staying out of the picture is still the best guarantee to retreat in one piece. Yunyang thought about it and murmured, if I were Ouyang Xiaoxi, I would have to come, but I wouldn't be in the East City area. If he didn't settle down in the East City area, he would have chosen the remaining three sides, north, south, and west. No, hiding in the south, west, and north can ensure his safety for a while, but it's still too far away from the East City area. Once something happens and the dust settles, the buffer time won't be enough. There's a high chance that he won't be able to make it in time. If that's the case, the Imperial City area in the middle of the four sides can be considered a good choice. Yunyang pondered for a moment before his gaze suddenly froze. No, I'm afraid the Imperial City area is still not the best choice. The cliched saying, the most dangerous place is the safest, is also applicable now. As long as I can find the blind spot of the most dangerous place, it'll be fine. The so-called blind spot of danger is none other than the darkest place under the light. Then what is the darkest place under the light in the East City area? Yunyang's mind seemed to have been struck by lightning as he came to a sudden realization. As long as one enters the East City area, it's a matter of life and death. There are few exceptions. No matter how high one's cultivation base is, one has no special privileges in the East City area now. No, there's a type of people in the East City area who won't be attacked, the soldiers. Once Yunyang thought of this, it was as if he had been enlightened. More thoughts immediately popped into his head. As long as Ouyang Xiaoxi could blend in with the soldiers who went in to collect the corpses, wouldn't he be able to grasp the current situation at all times? He could also intervene in the fight at any time. Conversely, as long as he doesn't make a move, he'll definitely not be attacked? Thinking about it from another perspective, this was indeed a very simple question, but it was also the best option. However, to arrive at this final conclusion, one would have to go one big round before one could think of it. This was a blind spot in one's thinking. What followed next was relatively simple. Yunyang went straight to Taizheng for help. Some things were handled by Taizheng. It was much faster and more convenient than Shui Wuyin. The chapter name is messed up. I'm contacting the editor to correct it. I'm ashamed. Chapter 697. That afternoon. Yun Xiaoyao led Yutong's experts and stood with their swords pressed against their swords as Taizheng gave his order. 3,500 soldiers swarmed into the city's east to collect the corpses. Now, Yutong's soldiers were much better at cleaning up the corpses than they had been previously. There was no longer a need to search in all directions, they only had to concentrate on searching the central area. The number of corpses was getting worse and worse, becoming fewer and fewer. After all, from the start of this war until now, whether it was the Assassin Alliance that was trapped inside or the heroes of the pugilistic world outside, those that were still alive could be said to be the elites of the elites. Almost all of them were ruthless characters that would not die so easily. Based on such a premise, the search for the corpses was much easier than before. The 3,000 men who had entered to bury the corpses retreated in no time. Yun Yang, who had turned into a cloud, observed each and every one of them carefully, but he still could not find any clues. As dusk fell, the scent of blood, accompanied by the aroma of food and wine, filled the air in the east of the city once again. Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat when the aroma wafted over. A gust of wind appeared among the clouds, blowing into the city without a trace. What entered his sight was a street that was crowded with hundreds of people, selling food and wine with loud voices. However, their true identities were the elite steel cavalry under Tai Zheng's command, warriors who had been through hundreds of battles. Yun Yang maintained his wind form, manifesting his deific consciousness on the spot to ensure that everyone was within the range of his deific consciousness. Yun Yang's deific consciousness was like a soothing wind, flowing through everyone on the spot, examining them carefully from top to bottom. He examined their faces, their aura, the difference in the skin color of their wrists, arms, and fingers, the difference in the skin color of their necks, shoulders, and faces, their arms, calves, and the rest of their bodies. There was nothing odd or out of place. Did their gazes and aura match? Were there any signs of surprise? Yun Yang understood that the blind spots of his disguise were in these places. Tai Zheng had sent a total of 700 men this time, which could be considered a large-scale market for cooks. Yun Yang had only detected less than 200 people, but he had already reaped a great harvest. The great harvest here did not refer to finding or locking on to Ouyang Xiaosha's suspect, but to discovering 7 impostors. It's really dark under the light. There are actually so many fish that have slipped through the net. Yun Yang almost wanted to slap himself. With so many fish that slipped through the net, it meant that his thoughts were not thorough enough and his arrangements were not strict enough. 700 people had entered, and there were still 700 of them. However, after checking less than 200 people, there were already 7 impostors. Then, where did the original steel cavalry go? This was something that was obvious without even asking. The impostor could be a martial artist from the outer circle, an assassin from the Grand Alliance of Assassins, or even Ouyang Xiaoshi. If Yun Yang had not left a secret mark on the 2 dragonhide treasure maps with the endless divine art and confirmed that the 2 maps were still within the assassin's encirclement, Hongzhan and Hen Bieli might have been among these impostors. If he hadn't had a flash of inspiration today, he might have made an even bigger mistake. Thinking of this, Yun Yang became even more attentive as he continued to probe forward, combing through the 700 people present. Finally, he realized that there were 35 outsiders mixed in with the rest of them. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath. Now, he could only hope that Ouyang Xiaoshi was among these 35 people. This was because it was no longer just Ouyang Xiaoshi's problem. These 35 impostors must all die. At the entrance of the main street, 2 soldiers dressed in military uniforms, helmets and armors. In front of them were piles of steamed buns that looked like a mountain. Beside the 2, there were about 7 to 8 people selling cooked food, braised food, and wine. Yun Yang, who had been hiding in the air, appeared from the wind manifestation. At the critical moment, he flicked his wrist. 3 golden rays shot out like lightning towards the throats of the 3 soldiers as if they were tearing through the air. Wherever the flying daggers passed, there was a dazzling brilliance. The golden blades pierced through the air, even leaving faint traces of green smoke due to the high-speed friction. It was easy to imagine that the speed of these 3 flying daggers had reached a level that was unimaginable to ordinary people. If it had been an ordinary soldier from the steel cavalry, it would have been impossible for him to evade these deadly flying daggers. However, just as the 3 flying daggers were about to reach the 3 targets, the 3 men tilted their heads almost in unison. The flying daggers slammed into the wall behind them. The 3 daggers that were supposed to hit their targets had all missed, not a single one of them had succeeded. Just as the 3 daggers had missed their target and nailed themselves into the wall, 3 silhouettes flew over like giant birds and continued to attack the 3 men. The newcomers were Yun Xiaoyao, Lao Mei, and Fang Mafei. Each of them took on one of them, their eyes filled with rage. "Shameless thieves, return the lives of our soldiers." The 3 soldiers chortled in unison and sprung up at the same time. "Yutong officials, you live up to your reputation indeed. You can actually see through our disguises." Before their words echoed in the air, the concealed sabers and swords had already been unsheathed, clashing with Yun Xiaoyao and the other 2 men in the air above the street. It was a pity that the battle was still going on. One of them had just parried Fang Mafei's sword and was about to retaliate when he suddenly felt his feet being entangled by something. When he lowered his head to check, there was nothing there. Then, his body fell as if he could no longer bear the burden. Was there someone pulling him from below? But there was nothing there at all. The man was horrified, but he had no way to react. He screamed in extreme panic. As Fang Mafei swung his sword, a head flew into the air with a loud thud. The corpse was split into 2, dead. On the other side, Yun Xiaoyao, who was the strongest among them, had used his ultimate technique right from the start, slicing his target into pieces without any resistance. As for Lao Mei, his cultivation base was the lowest among them, but he was still slightly higher than his target. He immediately gained the upper hand in the battle. It was only a matter of time before he took down his opponent. However, this problem of time did not hold water, because an invisible and shadowless power strangely appeared and forcefully wrapped around the neck of Lao Mei's opponent. That person's eyeballs bulged out as he was restrained and froze on the spot. Lao Mei did not hesitate as he swung his saber and the man was immediately cut into 2 at the waist, sending his soul to the underworld. The 3 targets had perished in the blink of an eye, but the surroundings were filled with bewildered gazes. The targets had probably been dealt with too quickly that no one could understand why Yutong officials would actually lay such a cruel hand on their own people. A few steel cavalry officers took a step forward with rage written all over their faces and asked, "Why? Why is King Xiaoyao so mercilessly trying to kill him without any reason?" However, as Yun Xiaoyao, Lao Mei, and Fang Mafei cleaned up the corpses and removed their disguises to reveal their true faces, all the steel cavalry officers who were present looked at each other for a moment before they shuddered in unison. No one knew these 3 men. In fact, just the fact that these 3 men had attacked Yun Xiaoyao and his team first, as well as the many disguises they had put on, had already explained too much. It was not that the steel cavalry had not seen them, it was just that they had not thought about it at first and did not want to believe it. Chapter 698. The expression of the steel cavalry officer who had asked the question changed as he stammered, "Then, my 3 brothers," Yun Xiaoyao heaved a long sigh. Although he did not say a word, everyone understood what he meant. Many of the cavalrymen fell silent, tears welling up in their eyes. Men did not shed tears easily, but the camaraderie they had accumulated on the battlefield could always trigger hot tears in a man. The steel cavalry officer choked out, "Then, my 3 brothers." Do we still have?" "Yes," Yun Xiaoyao answered painfully. "Who is it?" the officer asked angrily. "Who else?" His gaze, as sharp as a blade, swept across the faces of the people around him. Yun Xiaoyao sighed and took 2 steps forward to stand in front of the officer, saying softly, "It's..." Before he could finish, Yun Xiaoyao suddenly reached out and grabbed the officer's neck. His other hand struck down like lightning as he bellowed, "It's you." With a loud thud, the officer obviously did not expect that he would be recognized despite his good disguise, his perfect emotions, and his good sense of self-importance. He was caught off guard, and his shoulder was completely crushed by Yun Xiaoyao's strike, even his chest caved in. His eyes widened as he stared at Yun Xiaoyao in disbelief, struggling to speak. How did you, Yun Xiaoyao's eyes flashed with deep anger as he said, "How can a bastard like you possibly imitate the feelings of the steel cavalry? You don't think about avenging your brothers, don't ask where their remains are, and only care about looking for spies. What do you think you're a steel cavalry soldier?" The man's gaze was unfocused as he murmured, "I see, where are our men?" Yun Xiaoyao asked. The man laughed bitterly. "Who would have thought that I, the 1,000 illusion scholar, would fall here just like this?" His gaze, which had already begun to lose focus, looked at Yun Xiaoyao mockingly and chuckled. "As for your men, do you even need to ask?" Yun Xiaoyao bellowed in rage and smashed the 1,000 illusion scholar's head into smithereens. Around them, more than 50 steel cavalry soldiers watched the scene with bright eyes, their faces filled with anger and sorrow. Swoosh, 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 the golden light flashed again. This time, 5 beams of light appeared, and their targets were 5 people in the crowd. When the 5 of them saw the golden light coming towards them, they all let out a loud roar. Without the slightest hesitation, they all jumped up and ran away. Now that he had been exposed, if he didn't escape now, he would really be waiting for death. Unexpectedly, just as they leapt up, the 5 figures strangely stopped in mid-air. It was as if someone had tied ropes to their legs and pulled them back with a casual tug. Fang Mafei, who already had previous experience, was already prepared. With a sway of his body, the long sword in his hand struck again. The sword light was like a thunderbolt as 5 heads fell to the ground in unison. Without waiting for Yun Xiaoyao's steel cavalry soldiers to verify the identities of the dead, 7 or 8 people who had been mixed in with the steel cavalry soldiers had already leapt up into the air and flown away. Now that the situation was clear, they no longer dared to entertain the thought of hiding here. While they were not sure if the other party had already grasped their information, the 9 people who had been exposed were definitely not ordinary characters, especially the 1,000 illusion scholar, who could be said to be one of the few masters of disguise in the world. His method of disguise could be said to be flawless and flawless. At the very least, he could not see through it. Yet, he had still been captured and killed. If even such a person could not be dealt with, it would be no different from seeking death if they remained here. As they moved, the remaining impostors, who were still a distance away, followed suit. Then, another 12 people fled in all directions. Yun Xiaoyao was in no hurry to stop the escapees. Instead, he let out a long howl that shook the entire area. Amidst the howl, countless silhouettes appeared from all directions, intercepting the escapees in the air and attacking them. The people that appeared to obstruct them wore the same attire, and all of them wore a pair of savage and terrifying bronze masks, causing them to be extremely ghastly and terrifying. Similarly, their skills were also terrifying. They displayed great strength and shocking might, and they seemed as if they were chopping melons and vegetables. In just a short moment, they'd chopped 17 of the 20-plus people that intended to flee to the ground. At this point, only the last 3 people were still resisting stubbornly. The abilities of these 3 people were impressive indeed. Even when they were besieged by the 10 Yama kings and were at a slight disadvantage, they were still able to defend and attack without any signs of panic. Yun Yang watched in the dark and could not help frowning inwardly. Without hesitation, he joined the battle once more. Part of what had happened today had exceeded Yun Yang's expectations. He had neither the mood nor the time to be entangled with these people. It was best to end this battle as soon as possible. A light breeze blew slowly, as if everything was still the same as before. In spite of this, the 3 people who were immersed in the battle immediately felt that something was amiss. They were in midair, but they felt as if they were in the middle of the ocean. Every part of their bodies felt out of place, their limbs seemed to be affected by invisible waves as well, vaguely showing signs of being disrupted and pulled when they attacked. Under the accumulation of various influences, it was difficult for them to unleash their skills freely. Just as they were puzzled, they realized in shock that their feet seemed to be entangled by something, making it difficult for them to move. It was as if they were at the bottom of the sea, entangled by seaweed. They stole a glance but saw nothing. They hurriedly circulated their cultivation method to the limit, only then did they feel that the entangled parts of their feet could be freed. Although they had broken free from the shackles, the slight delay had already added 7 to 8 wounds to their bodies, inevitably reducing their combat power. Furthermore, it was evident that the other party was not affected by the strange disturbance. Did this not mean that the disturbance came from the other party? Otherwise, why would it only work on them? The three of them were both anxious and afraid. They roared, "What's going on?" In desperation, they exerted their cultivation base to the limit and charged out with all their might. In spite of this, the 10 Yama kings had already gained the upper hand. How could they allow the three of them to escape? They launched a further attack without hesitation, their momentum even stronger than before. The trend of the battle was getting more and more obvious. Chapter 699. Happy holidays, everyone. Today is our holiday. Hee, it's a holiday. It has two meanings. Firstly, today is Children's Day. We haven't grown up yet, right? So, happy holidays. Secondly, I am Ji-Zun opened my book on the 1st of June last year. It has been 1 year since then. So today is also a holiday for the children of the Feng family. I wish everyone happiness. In addition, I have a piece of news to report to everyone. From today onwards, on my official WeChat account, there will be a celebration for the first anniversary of Ji-Zun. From the 1st until the last day of this month, there will be a lucky draw every day. The prize is a piece of calligraphy that I have meticulously prepared for everyone. Ahem, I'm blushing a little. Feng Ling's handwriting is average. However, it can barely be considered as a token of my appreciation. My brothers will definitely not dislike it, right? I wrote it myself and made it myself. I wish everyone happiness and happiness. Time will not grow old, and the Feng family will not disperse. Thank you all. Everyone, please come and participate in the event. You can ask your friends to come and like it. Brothers and sisters who haven't followed me, hurry up and follow me. The event will last for a month. There will be a winner every day. Chapter 700. This loud roar shook the ears of everyone present to the point of buzzing, and for a time, they were no longer as sensitive as before. At the same time, another saber gleaming with a chilling glint appeared. The moment the saber blade appeared, the temperature of the entire space seemed to have dropped a few degrees. As soon as it appeared, endless saber light bloomed, gathering into a mountain of sabers in an instant. It fell with a loud crash, aiming straight for the source of the desolate aura. However, the desolate aura did not diminish in the face of the sudden crisis. Instead, it soared into the sky and retaliated. With a flick of his sleeve, saber light flashed like lightning. Yun Xiaoyao's sword and Lao Mei's saber were parried with a clang, while Fang Mafei's sword tip was deflected with a kick. 2 bolts of lightning shot out from his other sleeve, deflecting the weapons of the 2 kings of the underworld who were pursuing him. He then turned into a ball of lightning and soared into the sky, charging forcefully at the saber mountain blockade that Yun Yang had set up. After a series of explosions, he broke through the siege and soared into the sky. Then, a long howl could be heard. Lord Supreme Cloud, your target is indeed me. I am honored. The other party had broken through the siege, displaying an astonishing ability in the ability to control Qi and walk through the void. He had crossed 300 feet with a single step and had flown to the top of a large tree like a meteor. With a slight leap, he had turned into a black dot in the night sky with a swoosh. As for the last 2 targets, a rain of blood rained down from the sky as he fell from the sky. How powerful! Fang Mafei had only taken a kick from the other party, with his treasured sword acting as a buffer, but he still felt his hand go numb as he was flung away. Looking at his target, Ouyang Xiaoxi, who had soared into the sky, his eyes were filled with shock. Ouyang Xiaoxi's cultivation base had obviously far exceeded everyone's expectations. Yun Xiaoyao's face was filled with caution and disbelief. Back then, the two great assassins were equally renowned in the world, Dugu Jima and Ouyang Xiaoxi. They lived up to their reputations. Looking at the sky again, not only was the target gone, even the wind and clouds had disappeared. There was only silence in sight. 35 impostors have been caught. Yun Xiaoyao hollered, "Retreat! Return this place to the martial world." He glanced at the sky worriedly. The wind and clouds had dispersed, meaning that Yun Yang had gone to track his target. However, Ouyang Xiaoxi was far more powerful than expected. If Yun Yang chased after him alone, would there be another accident? Just as he was thinking about what to do next, he suddenly heard a rumbling sound coming from the other side. The assassins once again engaged in a fierce battle with the Jianghu people. The martial world's affairs shall be left to the martial world. Yutong's officials will not intervene. However, if anyone dares to harm our warriors or plot against us, the 34 dead men here will serve as an example. Also, death is not the end. Those who are involved in this case will have their entire families executed and killed without mercy. Yun Xiaoyao's voice was deafening as it rumbled across the sky above the east side of the city. When the people of the east city heard this, they all felt a chill in their hearts. In Jianghu, there had always been a saying that one should not involve one's wife and children in misfortune. It was almost an ironclad rule in Jianghu. However, it was obvious that the imperial court would not care about this martial world's iron rule. The martial world's affairs shall be left to the martial world. One shall bear the consequences of one's actions. No matter how great the disturbance was, as long as the person involved died, one person would have to pay with his life. However, when the imperial court's laws were broken, it was normal to have one's family executed. If it were any other day, the martial world's people would inevitably feel that the imperial court's method was too harsh. However, this time, the people did not feel that it was cruel. Instead, they only felt that it was reasonable. Yutong's officials had already made things convenient for the battle in Yutong's east city. They had even shown their goodwill and given the martial world's dead people a guarantee for their afterlife. Under such a premise, they had broken the rules and were enemies with everyone. Enemies with the martial world's people, the League of Assassins, and the Imperial Court of Yutong's Imperial Court. Of course, their deaths were not to be regretted. Ouyang Xiaoxi moved like a bolt of lightning, moving so fast that the naked eye could barely follow him. His movements were eerie, like an illusory shadow in the vast night sky. At this moment, Ouyang Xiaoxi exerted all the strength he had in his life to flee without reservation. He had been exposed. Supreme Cloud had his eyes on him. His top priority was to get rid of Supreme Cloud, to get rid of him completely. Only then could he talk about changing his identity and the rest. Of course, he could not give up on the Dragon Hide treasure map no matter what. To Ouyang Xiaoxi, this was already an obsession of his life. He would not regret it even if he died 9 times. He had long left the boundary of Tiantang City, which meant that he was getting further and further away from the danger zone. His chances of survival were increasing, but listening to the howling of the wind above his head only made him more and more anxious. The night was solemn, the heaven and earth were silent. Where did the howling wind come from? It had to be Supreme Cloud. It could only be Supreme Cloud. Of course, Ouyang Xiaoxi was well aware of this fact. However, to him, the only thing he could do was to keep running. After a while, Ouyang Shaoxi had already left the boundary of Tiantang City and arrived in the forest with complicated terrain. The misty night was still the same, but the grey shadow that Ouyang Shaoxi had transformed into suddenly circled and disappeared with a swoosh. This was a backup plan that Ouyang Shaoxi had long prepared. It was a secret cave that he had set long before he entered Tiantang City. It was also the main reason why he had continued to flee even though he knew that Yun Yang was on his tail and that he could not get rid of him. Even though the wind was strong, it could not cover everything. He had hidden himself in the secret cave that he had prepared in advance. What could he do? The howling wind was still in hot pursuit. The moment the wind entered the forest, a loud boom could be heard as the entire mountain was engulfed in a sea of fire. Monstrous flames rose into the sky. The land within a 1,000-mile radius was filled with billowing flames, a murky crimson. The moment the monstrous fire rose, the underground water level also rose. All the hidden caves and underground caves in the forest were no exception, and there were no omissions either. The ground and water were filled to the brim. With a strange cry, a silhouette rushed out of the fire in a disheveled state. It was Ouyang Shaoxi. The terrain of this forest was unusually complicated, and there were countless natural ravines and caves. Otherwise, Ouyang Shaoxi would not have chosen this route of retreat before he entered Tiantang City. In his estimation, as long as he could successfully escape into the predetermined hidden cave, he could rely on the few extraordinarily hidden and interconnected caves, as well as the dry rations and bedding that he had prepared beforehand. Even if Supreme Cloud were to discover him, he would still have a great chance of survival and room to maneuver. What he did not expect was that although he had managed to escape back to the forest where he had come from, Supreme Cloud had a way to deal with him as well. There was no need to waste time and effort to play hide and seek. He could directly set fire to the mountain, and not only that, he could also flood the land at the same time. The combination of water and fire intertwined. If he did not come out in time, he would be boiled human flesh even if he did not turn into charcoal. He had no choice but to come out and face Yun Yang. Chapter 701. Right at the instant he reappeared on the ground, thunder suddenly rumbled in the sky, and then bolts of lightning directly illuminated the entire world. Boom, 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 bolts of lightning struck down one after another without the slightest interruption. Faced with the power of the lightning punishment, Ouyang Shaoxi evaded with his swift movement skill again. However, lightning and thunder were very different from the way cultivators attacked. Not only did they fall from the sky, making it difficult to evade, but they were also very powerful. Few cultivators dared to take them head-on. Therefore, Ouyang Shaoxi was already flustered after a short while. While the lightning and thunder continued to wreak havoc in the sky, the sea of fire was also rapidly converging in this direction. Dragons of fire shook their heads and wagged their tails as they whizzed over, like a group of dragons fighting for a pearl. Thunder and fire intertwined. The murderous intent was already everywhere, but Yun Yang still felt that it was not enough. Rays of golden light shone brightly amidst the lightning and rained down like a storm. Those were the flying daggers that Yun Yang had released. They were also the signature move that had caught the many impostors today. It could be said that Yun Yang hated Ouyang Shaoxi to the core, so he went all out the moment he struck, completely eliminating any possibility of the old bastard escaping. The best way to avoid unnecessary trouble was to strike with all his might and not give the other party any leeway. Yun Yang knew Ouyang Shaoxi's ability better than anyone else. It would be strange if Ouyang Shaoxi did not have such a terrifying force. Ouyang Shaoxi and Old Dugu were equally famous, but Old Dugu could make the unrivaled swordsman, Jun Moyan, owe him a favor and even receive a medallion of gratitude. Therefore, one could only imagine Old Dugu's cultivation base. How could Ouyang Shaoxi be weak? Therefore, Yun Yang had used all his trump cards at once. Poof, poof, no matter how hard Ouyang Shaoxi tried to evade, the lightning seemed to be too dense. A bolt of lightning struck Ouyang Shaoxi squarely on the head. Ouyang Shaoxi let out a loud cry, and the smell of burnt flesh immediately rose from his body. The moment he was struck by the lightning, he could not help but slow down as a ray of golden light pierced deeply into his thigh. Ouyang Shaoxi howled, "Supreme Cloud, come out and fight me to the death if you have the guts." Unfortunately, his challenge did not receive any response. The only response he got was that the lightning in the sky became denser and the fire dragons became thicker. Yunyang knew very well that with the domineering combat power that Ouyang Shaoxi had displayed previously, it was impossible for him to stop at this level. It was impossible for the other party to not be able to evade his attacks. These two attacks must have been done intentionally by the other party. The goal was nothing more than to lure him out. As long as he could determine the direction and position he was in, it would be more feasible and efficient for him to come up with a follow-up escape plan. How could Yunyang be fooled? "Since you want to use the trick of injuring yourself, then I'll let you use it." Ouyang Shaoxi was struck twice in a row, looking extremely miserable. However, Yunyang did not fall for the trick, nor did he dare to deliberately take another strike. From the looks of it, if he were to continue with the ruse of self-injury, Supreme Cloud would probably turn him into charcoal. The power of the thunder in the sky was even more powerful than he had expected. Just the two strikes had paralyzed his body and slowed his movements. He was even beginning to regret his act of injuring himself to gain the confidence of others. If he had known that Supreme Cloud would not have fallen for it, he would not have suffered for nothing. The fire soared into the sky, growing more and more intense. The entire forest, all the mountains within a radius of no less than 1,000 miles, were all set ablaze by Yunyang. Towards the end of the fire, something similar to oil began to flow on the ground. All living beings in the entire forest, be it animals or plants, were engulfed by the sea of fire. Other than a few high-level beasts who had sensed it first and were lucky enough to escape, the rest were turned into ashes along with the trees and vegetation in the forest, leaving nothing behind. However, the raging flames did not show any signs of slowing down. They continued to rise and burn. At this moment, the temperature within a radius of 1,000 miles had risen to an unimaginable level. Even a Dao realm cultivator would inevitably suffocate in such a hot environment. Indeed, Yunyang had been burning here for a whole 4 hours, regardless of the cost and consequences. Even the ground had been scorched red. During these 4 hours, Ouyang Shaoxi had tried countless times to escape. However, as soon as he dashed out, the flames that surrounded him would burn fiercely, and the temperature was more than 10 times higher than anywhere else. In addition, the density of the lightning in the sky would be even more insane. As long as he retreated, the onslaught would be slightly alleviated. At least, he would be able to prolong his life and even have a chance to catch his breath. It was because of such an atmosphere that Ouyang Shaoxi had the opportunity to try to break out of the encirclement again and again. Unfortunately, the result of each attempt was to return to the initial situation. Ouyang Shaoxi understood very well that in the face of such a fiery and lightning-fast attack, even if he had to pay a huge price to break out, he would still have to face the final obstacle of Supreme Cloud himself. When that time came, he would be at the mercy of the opponent. As for himself, he retreated again and again. Although it seemed like a futile struggle and he was being toyed with, he would always have a chance to catch his breath. He could wait for the next opportunity, always retaining the last bit of strength for a desperate struggle. If this continued, it might not be advantageous for him, but for Supreme Cloud. Could he really maintain the state of controlling such a heaven and earth phenomenon? How much energy was required to control such a heaven and earth power? Was he not playing with fire by doing so? As long as he could hold on until Supreme Cloud's basic chi ran out, that would be the moment of his turning point. Therefore, Ouyang Xiaoxi kept repeating this cat-and-mouse game despite knowing that Yun Yang was toying with him. Slowly, however, he realized that he was wrong. It was no longer important that he could hold on until Supreme Cloud's basic chi ran out, because there were other ways to play this game, ways that were more advanced and exciting. As the burning continued, it became more and more thorough, and the heat also increased. The whole mountain had gradually transformed into a furnace. Every inch of the ground under his feet gradually turned dark red, like a part of the furnace. His throat seemed to be stuffed with burning coals. Every time he took a breath, it felt like his throat was being stabbed several times, and he was constantly being tortured. The longer he stayed, the more uncomfortable and unbearable it became. When he felt dizzy and almost could not hold on any longer, he was shocked to find that more than 70% of the cultivation base that he thought he had kept in reserve had been expended. No, he had to escape at once. Otherwise, before Supreme Cloud's basic chi could run out, he would have already been exhausted to death, roasted to death, and burned to death. Thinking of this, Ouyang Xiaoxi came to a sudden realization. The towering inferno continued to burn. At this point, there was no longer a need for Supreme Cloud to deliberately maintain the fire attack, the entire mountain would attack along with it. It was obvious that this was Supreme Cloud's plan from the beginning. Yet, he had foolishly plunged headlong into it and purposely got hurt. This was simply the height of stupidity. If he had charged out with all his might right from the beginning, Supreme Cloud might not have been able to stop him. Only by doing so would he have the greatest chance of survival in this battle. What he was doing now was the most passive way of doing things. Thinking of this, Ouyang Xiaoxi's intestines were green with regret. Chapter 702. Having endured in the fire for a few hours, even with Ouyang Xiaoxi's superb cultivation base, he was gradually unable to withstand the invasion of the heat. A layer of blisters had already formed on his body. If this continued, it would be difficult to even prevent his internal organs from being incinerated. Although Ouyang Xiaoxi had been in the martial world for a long time and was astute, he had never stayed in a fire for such a long time. It was only now that he realized that the continuous invasion of the heat waves alone was enough to burn his internal organs into ashes. If he stayed any longer, there would only be death awaiting him. With a shrill howl, Ouyang Xiaoxi turned into a gust of wind and dashed out, sticking close to the ground. He no longer dared to fly high in the sky. The heat waves in the sky were even more scorching, especially when he sprinted at full speed. The heat waves in the sky could literally steam and scrape off the flesh on his body piece by piece. However, even though his condition was slightly better when he ran on the ground, he still felt that the flesh on his thighs and chest would experience another intense burn with every step he took. Towards the end, it was as if his heart had become a scorching hot one. He gritted his teeth and sprinted out with all his remaining strength. This time, the monstrous fire did not chase after him, nor did the sky full of thunder and lightning. Yun Yang seemed to have given up. Even so, Ouyang Xiaoxi still ran for nearly the time it took to drink a cup of tea before he felt the surrounding air become slightly more comfortable. It was just that at this moment, Ouyang Xiaoxi's mind was in a mess, as if there were countless large drums beating madly in his mind. It was a strange feeling of dizziness. Everything before his eyes seemed to have turned into a myriad of colors, and he almost lost his vision. Ouyang Xiaoxi forced himself to focus and looked as far as his eyes could see. To his surprise, he saw a faint hint of green on the other side. It was the green of trees, the symbol of life. Ouyang Xiaoxi's spirit was lifted instinctively. He did not know where the strength came from, but he dashed towards the direction of the green without a care for anything else. Just as he rushed out of the sea of fire, a loud cry suddenly rang out, "Ouyang Xiaoxi!" Swoosh! A shining saber light fell from the sky, once again separating him from the other side of the green. Ouyang Xiaoxi subconsciously swung his saber with the last shred of clarity he had left. With a loud clang, it was clear who had the upper hand. The opponent's powerful and heavy saber strike was mixed with an unparalleled might, and it directly sent Ouyang Xiaoxi's entire body flying. Ouyang Xiaoxi had barely managed to escape from the fire, but he was immediately intercepted by a powerful slash. Under the powerful recoil, he was thrown back like a kite with a broken string. Yun Yang had obviously calculated the distance. About 70 to 80 feet behind Ouyang Xiaoxi was a piece of land that had been scorched red, with lava flowing from it. That was where Ouyang Xiaoxi, who had been sent flying, had landed back on the ground. Ouyang Xiaoxi lost his balance and landed on his buttocks first. There was a ripping sound, and it was no surprise that a certain part of his body had been scalded. Someone instinctively let out a loud howl, as if his buttocks were on fire. Well, the truth was that he had jumped up as if his buttocks were on fire. The back of his buttocks was still stained with burning dark red lava. This was no longer an ordinary wound on his buttocks, it was a full-on burn. He screamed and tried to push it away with his hands, but it was to no avail. Instead, his hands were scalded. With a loud cry, he gritted his teeth and cut off a large piece of bloody flesh from his buttocks, temporarily relieving the injury. The large piece of flesh that fell to the ground was still stuck to the burning charcoal. Ouyang Xiaoxi's face was contorted in pain. His entire body was trembling, and he was drenched in sweat. He raised his head fiercely and glared at a person who had appeared in front of him. It should only be a silhouette. It was a figure dressed in snow-white clothes, with a face that could not be seen clearly. Ouyang Xiaoxi was in so much pain that his vision was blurred. He said fiercely, "Supreme Cloud?" Yun Yang snorted and said faintly, "Ouyang Xiaoxi, I've finally caught you." Ouyang Xiaoxi sneered. "Caught? You might not be able to." Yun Yang chuckled. His voice was icy cold. "Do you actually think that you can still escape?" Ouyang Xiaoxi panted heavily. He could no longer care about the burning charcoal-like pain that came from breathing in. He said angrily, "Supreme Cloud, there is no deep hatred between you and me, nor is there any unresolvable enmity between us. If you are merciful and let me live today, I, Ouyang Xiaoxi, will definitely repay you generously in the future. If you go too far, I, Ouyang Xiaoxi, will inevitably have to fight to the death when I have nowhere else to go. It won't be good for either of us." Yun Yang sneered. "Fight to the death? Very well, I'm very interested to see how a dying fish like you can still stir up trouble and break through my vast net." Ouyang Xiaoxi sucked in a deep breath and endured the searing pain in his chest. He gritted his teeth and said, "Supreme Cloud is targeting me only because of Dugujima. Is there really a need to go to such lengths to fight to the death?" His face was contorted. After all, Dugujima is already dead. Death ends all troubles. It's better to make a friend for the living than to make a bunch of enemies for the dead. What do you think, Lord Supreme Cloud? Yun Yang said faintly, "What you said makes sense. However, this logic doesn't make sense to me." Ouyang Xiaoxi suppressed his anger and asked, "May I ask why?" Yun Yang took a deep breath and said through gritted teeth, "Dugujima is my father." As he said this, the anger and hatred in his heart suddenly erupted like a volcano. He hollered, "The death of one's father is absolutely irreconcilable. I wonder if you've heard of this saying before?" Ouyang Xiaoxi could only feel his breathing getting more and more difficult. It was as if smoke could come out of his throat at any time. He panted and said, "Then you've sworn to take revenge. Why haven't you made your move yet? Why are you spouting so much nonsense?" Yun Yang snorted and said, "If my purpose was only to kill you, how could I have allowed you to live until now? Don't tell me you don't feel even more uncomfortable now. Haven't you felt that your physical strength has declined again during this period of time? In other words, you should be feeling dizzy and weak right now, right? Ouyang Xiaoshi cried out and took 2 steps forward, his eyes glaring at Yun Yang. You've poisoned me? Yun Yang sneered. Poisoned? Do I need to poison you? Don't you know what is called fire poison? Does it feel good to have the fire poison attack your heart? Ouyang Xiaoshi gritted his teeth and charged towards Yun Yang abruptly. He raised both his hands at the same time, and 2 sharp blades that glimmered with a chilling glint shot out in a crisscrossed manner, pointing straight at Yun Yang. The ultimate skill that made him famous was the hidden blade in the sleeve. It was unexpected and unpredictable. However, the clothes on his body had been burnt to a crisp. How could there be any sleeves left? The 2 blades were already exposed, so there was no longer any element of surprise. Chapter 703. Yun Yang did not evade. With a loud cry, he slashed his saber at the heaven's gate again. There was nothing fancy about it. It was a simple straight slash. Then, with a loud clang, Ouyang Xiaoshi tumbled into the sea of fire once more. Ouyang Xiaoshi's actual cultivation base was far above Yun Yang's, having reached the intermediate level of the Dao realm. However, due to the continuous exhaustion and the fact that he had stayed in the fire for nearly 6 hours, he was already at the end of his rope. As the saying went, an arrow at the end of its flight cannot wear a pickaxe. Facing Yun Yang, who had Emmy's cheats and the endless divine art to support him, how could Ouyang Xiaoshi still be Yun Yang's opponent? Not to mention the fact that there were hundreds of burns all over his body. Bright blisters covered his entire body. At first glance, he looked like a bunch of grapes in the shape of a human. The recoil from Yun Yang's 2 saber strikes had caused a dozen blisters to burst on his body. The blisters were dripping and his flesh and skin were dangling from his body. The pain was excruciating, piercing deep into his lungs and bone marrow. Now that he was sent flying by Yun Yang's saber again, he almost fell into the pile of charcoal again. With a shudder, he became much more clear-headed and sprung up once more, charging forward with all his might. He was well aware that his previous judgment was greatly biased. He did not know how Supreme Cloud had done it, but the various anomalies he had conjured earlier did not consume too much of Supreme Cloud's energy. At the very least, he was no match for Fangzheng now. Moreover, Supreme Cloud had repelled him time and time again, but he did not kill him, he was still toying with him. He had to find a way to leave this area. Otherwise, he would inevitably fall into the burning charcoal again and again under the other party's continuous attacks. If that was the case, he would only be burned alive. With this in mind, he dashed out like a mad tiger, madly urging his remaining energy and life force to break out of the encirclement. Although Ouyang Xiaoshi was as ferocious as a frenzied tiger and was willing to risk his life, his injuries were too severe after all, and his actual combat power was extremely limited. Yun Yang could totally stop him and force him back into the pile of charcoal just like before. Unexpectedly, Yun Yang did not try to stop him. Instead, he retreated several thousand feet away from the boundary of the fire. Although the atmosphere here was still abnormally hot, it was already bearable and wouldn't burn to death. Ouyang Xiaoshi had fallen into a state of bewilderment after he had forcefully mustered his remaining strength to rush out of the fire. He had initially thought that his opponent's strategy was clear and was determined to fight him to the bitter end. No matter what, they would not allow him to rush out and leave the fire. However, he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to give in. While he was puzzled, he felt even more exhausted. That attack just now was supported by what little yuan qi he had left. Without the powerful interception that he had expected, the breath that he had forcefully gathered dissipated on its own. He felt that he could not even stand steadily. His eyes were filled with stars, and he was so tired that he wanted to die. "Are you tired? Do you want some water?" Yun Yang asked from the other side. You'll give me water? Ouyang Xiaoshi could not help but lick his lips. Would you be so kind? He was already exhausted, but when he heard the word water, he immediately felt as if his internal organs were on fire. Yunyang nodded. I've always been kind. If you want water, I'll give you water. Before his words could echo in the air, a loud rumble rang out. The sky suddenly turned upside down, and a bright white waterfall fell from the sky, pouring down in torrents. Ouyang Xiaoshi was inexplicably ecstatic. He opened his mouth almost instinctively and continued to drink without a care. At this moment, even if the water was poisoned, he would accept it. Yunyang looked on coldly from the sidelines, allowing Ouyang Xiaoshi to drink to his heart's content. A smile appeared on his blistered face. Supreme Cloud is indeed a gentleman. For this water, even if you and I are enemies of life and death, I, Ouyang Xiaoshi, will still appreciate your kindness. Yunyang said with a fake smile, appreciate? There's no need. Besides, I'm not a gentleman, as long as you can accept my kindness. Ouyang Xiaoshi was speechless. He immediately felt that something was wrong, but he could not figure out what was wrong. Right now, he really needed the nourishment of water too much. Once he gulped down the water, not only did the restlessness in his body dissipate, even his basic qi had recovered by half. His current condition was much better than it had been earlier. However, he immediately sensed that something was amiss. He was still wondering why Yunyang would be so kind as to give him water to drink and even let him rest when he was on the opposite side of the conflict. Yunyang was too kind, too soft-hearted. However, as a strange feeling rose within him, Ouyang Xiaoshi suddenly felt that something was not right. It was a kind of itch that started very slight, but gradually intensified, gradually growing. Gradually, it grew to an unbearable level. Itch, an unbearable itch. That feeling was simply too exhilarating. Supreme Cloud. Ouyang Xiaoshi howled, "You're despicable." Yunyang lifted his head, a ruthless smile on his face. With this great sir, who has inflicted immortal's odium on an old friend of decades, who dares to call me despicable? Ouyang Xiaoshi screamed continuously, his voice no longer resembling that of a human. His state of mind should not have been so unbearable. Not only was his cultivation base profound, but his physical body had also gone through the baptism of countless years of refinement. Even if it was not indestructible, it was hard to shake. Under normal circumstances, the medicine that Yunyang had used on him could be said to be inconsequential. He only needed to circulate his cultivation and it would all be gone. However, it was different now. Not only was Ouyang Xiaoshi's body covered in blisters, his skin was torn and his flesh was unusually tender. In addition, there was also a small part of his body that was damaged internally and filled with pus. The water that had been contaminated with a large amount of itch medicine had really amplified the effect by more than 100 times. Moreover, he had drunk a bellyful of it. At this moment, it was a pincer attack from the inside out, making it even more unbearable. It was as if the itch had spread from the marrow to the outside. Supreme Cloud. Supreme Cloud. Ouyang Xiaoshi screamed, "You're so vicious. So vicious." He spread his arms wide. The itch was unbearable, but he dared not scratch it. His body was covered in blisters, and a slight scratch would cause at least a dozen of them to burst. When the pus flowed out, it would only be more unbearable. However, if he did not scratch, he would not be able to withstand it. He had personally experienced the true meaning of 100 claws scratching one's heart today. This excruciating sensation made Ouyang Xiaoshi thoroughly understand what it meant to be better off dead than alive. Saber light flashed as he sprinted straight towards Yunyang. The muscles on his face were contorted, and his gaze was frenzied. This was no longer a fight for his life, but a suicidal attack. Clang! Clang, 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 Yun Yang's dozen consecutive slashes landed on Ouyang Xiaosha's saber. Each slash was filled with a forceful, continuous force, causing Ouyang Xiaosha's body to sway continuously as he retreated. With the continuous impact of the force, the blisters on his body ruptured one after another, causing pus to splatter everywhere. After more than a dozen slashes, Ouyang Xiaosha's body was so broken that he no longer looked human. Most of the blisters on his body had ruptured. The itch was even more unbearable. Arg! Ouyang Xiaoshi finally could not stand it anymore. He threw away the two sabers that had turned into saw teeth and scratched his body with all his might. Chapter 704. With a single scratch, a large piece of flesh was torn off. His current physical body could only be described as fragile, it could not even be considered weak. Ouyang Xiaoshi screamed and scratched desperately. The flesh on his body had already been completely scratched off, but he still felt only an itch and no pain. Finally, he could not stand it any longer. Ouyang Xiaoshi dashed a dozen meters away and rolled on the ground, desperately rubbing the rough surface against his skin. Everywhere it passed, there was blood mixed with flesh and skin. He screamed, moaned, and cursed, rolling around hysterically. "Give me a quick death! Give me a quick death!" Ouyang Xiaoshi screamed and begged desperately. Poof! Yun Yang stepped on Ouyang Xiaosha's neck with one foot and forced him to face the sky. Yun Yang's cold gaze stared into Ouyang Xiaosha's already befuddled eyes and said coldly, "Answer a few of my questions and I'll consider giving you a quick death." Ouyang Xiaoshi could no longer hear what he was saying. The only thing he could feel was an unbearable itch. His neck was stepped on, making it difficult for him to move, but his entire body was still struggling and rubbing. At this moment, Ouyang Xiaosha's physical condition could be said to be miserable. There was no skin or flesh left in his lower abdomen, and even his intestines had been dragged out with a clatter. Yet, they were still convulsing and struggling for their lives. Under normal circumstances, even a high-level cultivator would not be far from death in such a situation. However, this normal situation did not apply to Yun Yang. Yun Yang raised his hand, and a cooling force mixed with the air of vitality enveloped Ouyang Xiaoshi. Ouyang Xiaoshi was startled to find that the itch had completely disappeared, and his consciousness returned. Focusing his gaze, he noticed that in front of him, a cloud of mist seemed to be rippling and slowly coalescing into a human figure. Two cold, electrifying gazes focused on his face without the slightest hint of emotion. Supreme Cloud. Ouyang Xiaoshi murmured, "Give me a quick death. I may have harmed your father, but we have been brothers for 70 years after all. Even if I have not treated him well, after this torture and this life as repayment, it should be enough, right?" His gaze was lost, as if he had seen something. Suddenly, he screamed shrilly, "Dugu! Brother, I've let you down. I'm sorry." Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat. Another wave of cooling energy was sent out as he gritted his teeth and said, "That's right. You and old Dugu are brothers. That's why he went to the Empire of Zio and didn't look for anyone else but you. He trusted you, he treated you as a brother, but you sent him to hell." Ouyang Xiaosha's consciousness became clearer and clearer. However, after the itch, an overwhelming and boundless pain assaulted him. He panted heavily for a long time before he finally let out a bitter laugh and said, "Yes, I am despicable. I deserve it. Just kill me. I'll go to the underworld to personally apologize to him and make amends." Yun Yang replied coldly, "Apologize? Apologize? Why do you think I'm still keeping you alive until now? I just want to ask you something on behalf of old Dugu." He looked into Ouyang Xiaosha's eyes and asked, "Why do you want to harm me? We've been brothers for so many years, why do you want to harm me? Old Dugu didn't have the chance to ask you personally. This was also his last regret. I'm sure the old man is still puzzled until now. So, I'm asking you on his behalf. Yun Yang's gaze was like a bolt of lightning as he stared at Ouyang Xiaoxi. Ouyang Xiaoxi, tell me, why? Ouyang Xiaoxi was in a daze. His gaze seemed to be unfocused as he stared at the night sky. After a long, long time, he suddenly let out a bitter laugh. Tears streamed down his cheeks along with this bitter laugh. He lay on the ground and did not speak for a long time. Finally, he let out a long sigh. Back then, we roamed the martial world on our own. We weren't actually close friends, but because our names were similar and we both had the same surname, even our names were similar, we were always mentioned in the same breath by some meddlesome martial artists. One was Xiao Se, the other was Gu Du. It was truly a solemn sight. Gradually, some people began to put both of us in the same breath. When one was mentioned, the other would definitely be mentioned. However, at that time, we didn't know each other. At most, we knew of each other's existence, that's all. Back then, it was me who found a way to find him. We sparred for a bit and realized that we were really equally matched, so it wasn't considered a disgrace to myself. Since then, we became friends and even fell in love with each other after interacting with each other. In the end, the rumors in the martial world became a reality. He was older than me by 3 years. I respected him as my elder brother. Later on, both of us worked together to do many things, but because of this, we also made many enemies. When we returned from our last work, we found that our families had all been murdered. Not a single one of them was spared. Ouyang Xiaoxi sighed. Naturally, both of us were enraged and filled with hatred. We tried everything we could to find our enemies and used all kinds of methods and ways to kill them all, but after our revenge, I was left with nothing but silence. Dugu Du was even more disheartened. Finally, one day, he left without saying goodbye. I don't know where he went. Once he left, we didn't see each other for a whole 37 years. Until the year before last, he suddenly came to Zilong City and found me. He said to me, "Avenge me." As Ouyang Xiaoxi spoke up to this point, Yunyang felt a sudden jolt in his heart. A sour feeling welled up within him. Ouyang Xiaoxi continued, I asked him then, "What's wrong?" He told me that my son had been set up by someone. I smiled and said, "There's nothing to say. Your son is my son, of course, I'll help you." Then, he began to make his move in the empire of Zio. As the local tyrant, I covered for him. With the combined might of both of us, no one in the empire of Zio could stand up to us. We could kill anyone we wanted. Including the nobles, generals, and ministers, even the emperor of Zio, who could stop the two of us from joining forces. That so-called great perfection grandmaster can't even withstand a move and a half under our hands. Every time we returned after killing someone, Dugu would look for me for a drink. Each time, he'd pour 8 goblets of wine on the ground and say, "Son, your father has avenged you." Listening up to this point, Yunyang felt a stinging sensation in his nose, almost tearing up. Remember that time, I teased him and asked him, "Where did you get so many sons?" He said, "These are all my sons. They were all good children, but it's a pity that they've been set up." Until the very end, after a murder, he really drank too much that day. He pulled my hand and told me that he'd forgotten something important. I asked him, what did he forget? He said that he had a treasure map, but he'd forgotten to leave it for his youngest son. Yunyang opened his mouth in an unusually forgetful manner, exhaling and inhaling as he chanted in his heart, "Old Dugu. Father. You." You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.